Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Neon Genesis EvanGLORIO, our watch/rewatch of Neon Genesis Evangelion. I'm your host, Jel, and I've got with me, as always, my co-hosts, Iro and G. And a bit of a bittersweet episode this week, as it's our last one.
Thank goodness, we are finally free.
We have reached
until they put Evangelion on the whatever media delivery platform will exist in another 20 years from now.
Okay, so we'll regroup in 20 years and do another rewatch,
of course,
of Evangelion. When I'm applying for Social Security, if it still exists.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're awfully optimistic that we're all gonna still be here in 20 years.
Let's not go off on that tangent. So yes, we have literally reached the end of Evangelion, as we finished up the TV series last episode, and this episode we are going to talk about the End of Evangelion movie, and then we're gonna wrap things up with our final closing statements and our final thoughts on the show. But we do still have a lot to talk about in this final episode. And we will start, like we said, with the End of Evangelion movie. And so this was a theatrical release that came out like barely a year after the TV show ended. And I think it's pretty clear it's, at least in some ways, a response to the backlash. It's got to be, right? Like,
it's probably. It's more like 18 months after the show ended.
I'm not going to get into my fucking thesis on End of Evangelion 2 minutes into this podcast. But
okay,
I am a little bit more skeptical about the explanation that End of Eva is like Anno like lashing back out again at the fan base, because I don't know. There are some things in this movie that some of it feels reactionary, and some of it definitely feels like Anno's attempt at like a do-over, so to speak.
There are elements in this movie, or rather in episodes 21 and 26, there were elements there that like you can kind of make a one-to-one between them.
Yeah, and even the fact that it's framed as episode 25 and 26 again.
Right, yeah.
Is
25 prime and 26 prime.
Sure. So
I just think it's funny to say that. I'm sorry.
Yes, I agree. But yes, even the fact that they're both episode 25 and 26 feels like a do-over, right? So, but let's get into the details of it then. So, like we said, it is, even though it's a movie, technically, it is divided into 2 episodes. Mm-hmm. The first one being episode 25, titled Air. And we pick up, this timeline-wise, this would have been, I guess, shortly after Kaoru dies.
Yeah.
Shinji's in bad shape. Asuka is also in bad shape because she has not recovered from the previous Angel fight and is basically in a coma in the hospital.
Asuka was in worse shape.
Yes, you could say Asuka is not even conscious. So,
yeah.
And we kick things off with Shinji visiting Asuka in the hospital. He's feeling desperate because he has nothing. He feels like he has nobody left. He even specifically says like Masato and Rei scare him now. And he just wants Asuka to wake up and yell at him again.
Well, gee, Shinji, maybe you should have visited Toji in the hospital.
Did they move him out of Tokyo 3 at this point?
He's not even in this movie.
I know he's not in the movie, but
I can only assume that he and Kensuke have been shoot out. I don't think Kensuke shows up either.
Yeah, I've heard talk that there was to be a scene with them in this movie that was cut. I don't know how true that is.
I mean, that sounds more like wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to hammer it again. I'll point out that like for all Shinji like bemoans like the lack of friends and connections he has, he sure doesn't really put in a good fucking effort to like stay in touch with any of them here at the end of the story.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of saying it's like his perception of things, right? He feels like everybody has left him and he has nothing left, right? which is, I mean, it's true to a certain extent, but
I don't know. I guess it's like, for me, it's like the vibe I get from Shinji, just it like this is going to be like a pervasive, I guess, theme throughout this movie for me. But it's like, I feel like this is the beginning of like this movie just being like, how like fucking pathetic can we make Shinji? Like how just
yeah,
I don't know, just how much
How
of a
low can he go?
Yeah, how low can he go? Because he gets pretty fucking low here in the opening minutes of this movie.
yes. Within not even 5 minutes into the movie, we get to quote unquote that scene.
I forgot that this was literally
It's
like
literally like right in the beginning of the movie, where this is sort of the infamous scene where go ahead, G.
I was gonna say sorry, I just was gonna say, echoing the same thing. Like, I am familiar with this scene due to cultural osmosis. I had no clue this was at the very beginning of this movie. Like, wow, way to set the fucking tone of your film.
It's shots fired right off the bat, I think. If anything, to say, hey, this is a movie and we can get away with stuff we could never get away with on TV. Even borderline for movies, for that matter. But this is the famous scene, of course, where Shinji ends up masturbating to Asuka's naked comatose body in the hospital.
Very cool, Shinji. You really have grown up. I'm so proud of you. Just look how far you've come since episode 1.
Hard to get too much lower than that, which even Shinji acknowledges.
I mean, he does, but also like
doesn't make it okay.
No, it's that tough thing I fall into where it's like, Shinji is clearly depressed here, right? Like, of course, he's going through a real tough time. He just, killed, Kaworu and all this stuff. But, like, I don't know, man. This is like, it's like, I'm not going to say out of character. I'm not going to say that. I know some people kind of throw that accusation at End of Evangelion. But, like, it is such a stark turn, I guess, for, like, the way this story has been going, the way Shinji's character has developed. Like, I feel like I have heard people make the claim that, well, like, yeah, Shinji's like a depressed, like, desperate kid. Like, we all make mistakes. And I'm like, no, my guy. This is more than a fucking, like, innocent mistake. This is not just boys will be boys. This is some real fucked up shit. And, like, I guess it's, for me, it's like, you were saying at the very beginning of this, like, oh, this is like, like End of Eva is Anno taking shots at the fan base. And, like, I'm sure somebody has made the argument that, like, oh, like, this is Anno being like, ooh, you like Asuka, huh? Well, guess what? Like, here's your Asuka fan service, you sick fuck. But, like, it's also, like, portrayed so gratuitously that, like, I don't know. It's like, if it's a scene meant to, like, make, like, the fan base feel ashamed of themselves, I guess I'm not sure, like, if it quite succeeded in that regard.
Yeah, I don't know about that. As far as Shinji's characterization, I do agree, and I think I noticed it more on this rewatch. It did kind of raise an eyebrow a bit on his path from where we left off in the TV series to, like, now, more so than I think it had the first time I watched the movie. Because I still don't know if it's that far off base, but it does seem like a lot of the progress that he's had made has been undone at this stage. I will say, like, if we're talking about people, suffering from depression or, other problems, it's not like there's a magical switch where they're just better, right? So, like, I could see maybe approaching it from that angle. But
I think that, like, his downward trajectory of the last third or so of the show, like, to get to this point would have needed another half show worth or something of, like, continuously going downhill. Right. Whereas it kind of feels like it drops off a cliff.
I think that's a good way to put it, is that the way Shinji acts in this movie, I will get into this more as we get further into our kind of recap of the movie, but, like, I'll just say for now that, like, the way Shinji acts in this movie, I'm not going to say is unbelievable. I can see Shinji plausibly acting like this, but as Iro said, I think I need at least, like, 2 or 3 episodes after Kaworu's death to like continue to portray that downward spiral.
Right.
Because like,
I think that's fair. So it's not just dropping off the cliff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll get a little more into Shinji's state of mind in a bit here, but so after we leave the hospital scene, we get a couple of scenes cut together here, I think, with Misato kind of talking about the things that she's found out from Kaji in her own investigation, and also Seele themselves basically explaining the concept of instrumentality, and that's the time is upon us now for this to happen, where we're gonna all become one, or whatever the whole plan is. And Seele finally makes their move.
Seele has had enough of Gendo's shit. Like, after an entire 26 episodes of Seele saying, Gendo, if you fuck with us one more time, we're gonna come for you. They finally make good on their threat.
The 14th time is a charm or something.
Yeah, I do want to point out that it's a shame that this scene is like such a small bit out of this movie and the show as a whole. But we do get a tiny conversation between Maya, Hyuga, and air guitar guy, and they're basically just like, we beat the angels, aren't we done?
Yes.
Like, we saved the world.
Why is everybody still on high alert?
Right. And it's like, right. I feel like I really would have liked to have seen more of their perspective as a cipher for someone who is more grounded in this universe.
Right.
Because all the other characters are just like Shinji and Asuka are practically more metaphors than characters. Like, same with Gendo. Ritsuko is a whole nother fucking can of worms as what she represents as a character. Like, Misato, I feel like used to be a little bit more grounded, but now she has kind of gone full in on her own deal. So we don't really have any I'm not saying that traumatized people are not normal people. I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like the Bridge Bunnies here kind of represented a more I'm not saying these people were not traumatized, and they're plenty traumatized by the end of this movie, but they kind of represented a mindset of more what is all of this for people where working at Nerve is just a job,
Right.
A very important job, but not air guitar guy is right. Air guitar guy is not Nerve is my life's work. I have devoted my life to destroying the angels. No, air guitar guy is probably
I got to pay my rent so I can keep up my guitar playing, right?
Yeah, I got to pay. Yeah, I work at Nerve because I
pay my hairstylist.
Yeah. Air guitar guy is probably just I work at Nerve because I switched majors at the last second in college, and it turns out that Nerve was looking for I don't know, fucking analytics communication specialist.
It's the most steady work you can get when there's
also it helped pay for my expensive guitar or something,
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
It's just a shame. I'm not saying we need maybe this is an episode that would have fit more the TV series. I would have liked an episode of the TV series that's just what do these three guys do?
Yeah. Ironically, I feel like they get sprinkled into this more than they usually do.
Totally. But at the same time, I feel like even in this movie, they kind of serve as just
the viewpoint characters, right?
Yeah, they're viewpoint characters who just kind of serve to be talking heads to move the plot along, because fucking in the next 20 minutes there is nobody left alive to do their jobs. So.
Yeah. So as we were saying, Seele makes their move. They start by trying to hack the Magi computer, and this means getting Ritsuko and Misato back to work. It's that desperate of a situation. Gendo has the balls to go get Ritsuko out of her cell to have her stop the hacking attack.
Is that balls, or is that just
that's the wrong term?
Is that just Gendo being shitty, just being you have a use again, woman?
Usual asshole self.
Get out there and do the thing I expect you to do.
Yeah, and Misato gets back into the her operations command role as they try to deal with this. So Ritsuko's fighting back against the hacking thing, and this isn't important, but I just wanted to mention that she puts up a Type 666 firewall.
God, don't even. It's both very good, but also the dumbest fucking thing. Like the single dumbest thing this movie
Genesis
maybe
Evangelion,
does.
baby.
Like, I'll get into this more as we get further into the movie.
If you're gonna name your firewall that's blocking God or whatever, you might as well name it Type 666.
This is what I mean when this is what I mean when earlier in this podcast, in this series of podcasts we've done, where I said I don't actually know what he's fucking doing with this Judeo-Christian imagery, and I feel like
that one's just a fun.
No, that was just
a parking garage later.
Yes, I guess what I mean is I feel like. So watching the Evangelion TV show, I kind of came away with certain thoughts. I came away with certain takes on the show, and I also came away with a perspective on many of the things that are associated with Evangelion, both good and bad. I feel like End of Evangelion almost kind of becomes a weird 90-minute showcase of all of Evangelion's most egregious stereotypes. The 666 firewall is emblematic of Anno just playing with Judeo-Christian bullshit that he clearly doesn't actually understand.
Right.
In the TV show, it was a little bit more nuanced. I mean, as nuanced as you can have 3 AI computers named after the 3 wise men, but it felt a little bit more in the background, whereas here it almost feels like Anno's just I'm just gonna throw shit in here because it's cool.
They lay it on pretty thick for sure. But yeah.
Also, I would like to point out, even in this movie, we get some reused footage of the anti-hack.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, did we talk about the whole rebirth thing and how this came out as part of the?
That's right. That did happen.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it briefly.
The director's cut episodes were Death and Rebirth is this first half.
Right. So by the time End of Evangelion came out, basically this first half had already been seen, and I guess they had patched together. They were still patching stuff together at that point. I don't know, but yeah, we did get a little bit of we still got the shot of the Magi computer going to the last little blue blip, and then
I mean, whatever. It's a good looking shot.
It's a good image. That's fine.
Yeah, it just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Ritsuko does manage to stop the attack, perhaps unfortunately, because once the hacking attempt stops and Sele was going to try to do things the nice way, they're like, well, we're going to have to do this the hard way.
Yeah, but Sele goes from fucking 0 to 60 here, where they're like, well, the hacking didn't work. Time for murder, I guess.
Yeah, so they send a Special Forces strike team to infiltrate Nerve and basically kill everyone.
It's real Spec Ops shit
Hooray.
here.
Which
I mean, I think
random guards who are just
yeah. I do like this scene though, in a sense, because I mean, it's a very this is a very well-worn trope in media, right? So what we're talking about is we kind of basically had a montage of the JSDF Special Forces infiltrating and invading Nerve headquarters and kind of clandestinely killing their way through its personnel and it's very well done. It's very well executed from a presentation standpoint. It's very horrifying in a lot of ways.
They haven't gotten this type of modern military stuff for a while,
right? And this part, and I think it definitely gets into this element of again, very well worn trope of oh, man is the real monster, right? Man's inhumanity to man. It's a very well established trope,
right?
And we have the bits where the Nerve people are this is not. What is the lines this is
we were prepared to fight angels or something, but not
right.
people.
Yeah, these are people who these are people who are technically trained by the military. They technically probably put hours on the range,
right?
But these are not.
Maya goes to pick up the gun or whatever. And they're you went through basic training, didn't you?
Right, but it's these are people who have never actually shot human beings. Like
they're like scientists and
these
engineers, and at best like security guards, right?
and I do like this, and I do like this because like it reminds you that Nerve is a paramilitary organization. They are not military. They are parallel to the military, and that much of the power, much of the clout that we saw them kind of swing around in the TV series, this is like a very harsh reminder that like that clout only exists so long as the powers that be allow them to.
Right.
Like it kind of like weirdly enough, it made me flash back to like the early days of the show during like Operation Yashima, where like Masato could just fucking drive to a military base and be like, "We're taking your positron rifle,"
Right.
and like it is that reminder that this authority was only like lended to Nerve. Nerve never actually had this authority, and they never had like, and without the Evas, they actually do not have the ability to enforce that authority.
Yeah, they actually have the line when the invasion starts where they're like, all legal protections or whatever have been lifted, or like they have,
like that.
Yeah,
it's a very uncomfortable reminder of like human nature and relationships that like laws. I'm not. Believe me, I'm not going full fucking like Darwinist here, but I'm just saying that like laws only exist as long as people like decide to uphold them.
Right.
And again, like these are all very well-worn tropes, but I think that like End of Evangelion, which I'll get into, like I have a lot of problems with this movie all said and done, but I do like this scene as kind of that one of those like kind of it is a good version of that trope.
Yeah, and we'd already been kind of hinting at the real enemy is man thing, even.
Oh, for a while. I mean, this is
is like the literal manifestation of it at this point, right?
Yeah,
there's literally
this is
people coming in and violently murdering.
One of those dudes got a motherfucking flamethrower.
Yeah, that seemed like a little much.
That seemed a bit like, I mean, I don't know, like that's some fucked up shit, my guy. Like I'm not, killing is killing at the end of the day, but like, slitting throats and silenced pistols, I get. Fucking
flamethrower
is a lot, man.
Unnecessary.
It's a lot, and like, I mean, it's what was I going to say? It's once again that thing of like, this is Anno taking a lot of inspiration from Toku, right? Like we talk about like what are Evangelion's inspirations, and like I think all Toku movies eventually have that like scene in the middle that it's like man is the real enemy, but they do such a good job of kind of executing on it here.
Right. So the special forces are pushing through Nerve. They have been commanded to kill the Eva pilots on sight, so Misato prioritizes getting them to safety. So we have... does she know where Rei is at this point? Because Rei is in terminal dogma with Gendo, as we saw at some point.
During this, Gendo gets up to go there.
Yeah.
I don't remember if we saw that yet, or we just...
Yeah, we see Rei leave her apartment, and we see Gendo
right
there.
I do like the scene where they're just like Asuka's not even conscious, and you're like, just throw her in the goddamn cockpit and toss Unit 2 into the bottom of this lake.
Some time, right?
Yeah,
and
safer there than the hospital room.
And they want to deploy Shinji, but Shinji is curled up in a ball under a staircase somewhere.
Shinji just continues to be fucking like, just. Again, I'm not blaming him for it. I'm not trying to like, I'm not trying to like fucking blame him for the way he's acting in this movie. But like, this is kind of the like, so Jell, when you both of you, like, how long after the original TV series did you guys watch End of Evangelion?
It was a couple years for me.
Probably like right after for me, because I was like, watching all.
Sure, okay. Like, I guess I'm curious because, like, so you both had kind of actually pretty different experiences on this. Like, I don't know, man. Like, coming off a TV show, like, just Shinji seems even more pathetic than usual in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, fucking...
I mentioned it at the end of last episode how, the memories are coming back to me now. Like, I was actually pretty cool with Shinji by the end of the TV series, and the End of Evangelion movie is what, like, really soured my opinion on him.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling, because, like, again, like, I'm not trying to blame him, I'm not trying to victim blame him here, but, like, it's just, like, he is such a sad sack of shit in this movie, like, even more than the TV series.
I think
like, in a way that almost feels like not like a mockery, but like a caricature of depression almost.
Right. So I think like when I thought about always like the Shinji in my head all these years has been TV show Shinji this whole time, even after watching End of Evangelion, if that makes sense. And so like watching it now does kind of throw into like stark relief.
I think it was the opposite for me, where my kind of long-term memory...
It seems to be that way for most people.
My long-term memory of Shinji was End of Evangelion Shinji, which is why when I went back and started watching the TV show again, I was like, oh, maybe Shinji wasn't so bad. I kind of forgot because it had been like 10 years or something. And now I'm remembering. I do think on this rewatch, I think I understand Shinji's like feelings better, but I still don't feel like it's enough for me to change my general opinion of his actions in this movie. Starting right off the bat with what he does to Asuka, but then even how just completely defeated and just completely giving up, almost in like in a way that almost doesn't quite line up with the character arc that we've been sold on.
Like, I mean, so long story short, Misato sees Shinji fucking curled in a ball on the security camera, so she has to bail from headquarters to go single-handedly rescue him.
Right, so she's got to get him to Unit 1 so that they can sort to Unit 1 and maybe have some hope of stopping this, right?
Yeah.
So, Misato takes off to get Shinji to Unit 1, which in the meantime, Central Dogma gets breached, and our bridge crew ends up getting caught in a shootout with the special ops, which they say the only reason why they're not dead is because they're sitting on top of the original Magi and they don't want to blow it up.
Right. Fucking air guitar guy got a fucking Uzi in this.
Yes.
He's straight up
in his desk.
Yeah. Look, man. Like, yes. Right. Again, the reminder that this is a paramilitary organization. Like, air guitar guy probably fired an Uzi like once at the firing range.
I was like, oh, that's cool.
Keeps that thing. And keeps that thing in the desk because he doesn't need it. Because when the fuck, because that's the thing, right? Again, like when the fuck would Nerve ever even need these handheld weapons when they're fighting the Angels, right? Even when Ribbon Arms was about to fuck up Central Dogma, all the way back in episode 22, like, what the fuck is air guitar guy gotta fucking grab that Uzi out of the desk and like start dumping rounds?
I wish he did.
I wish he did. I really wish he did in retrospect. Like,
I feel like a couple things this movie kind of cement him as the best one.
I really came around on him, even if he is the one of the three I cannot name.
I think his name is Alba.
Oh, is what?
Alba?
I don't think I've ever heard that in 20 years. His actual name.
Alba. Okay. Right, sure.
I think.
Sure.
Air guitar guy.
Air guitar guy.
So they're kind of they somehow managed to keep them at a standstill, I guess, because they're sitting on the computer. And
can't use the heavy weaponry on them. Can't bring out the flamethrower on this one.
Yeah. So in the meantime, the troops do find Shinji as he's curled up under the stairs. And they're about to put him down until Misato shows up at exactly the right moment.
Just fucking action heroes, these dudes.
Yeah. I guess...
like, we got that soldier guy who literally drops the line like fucking nothing personal, kid. To which Misato pulls off the very good like action hero counter one-liner of also saying nothing personal to him.
Right.
When she fucking blasts him point blank.
Through the chin.
Yeah. Some real John Wick shit.
Yeah. I guess Misato went through more than basic training then.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like Misato. I feel like when Nerve was at the company training day, I bet Misato probably took like the optional CQC courses that like nobody else that like weren't required, but were like quote unquote encouraged.
Channel that anger and hatred toward the Angels into your close quarter combat training. But so she takes the dudes out and she's like, let's go, Shinji. And Shinji is just a lump on the floor.
Drags him away.
Ball of jelly that she literally has to drag through headquarters because Shinji basically has given up. He's like, I want to die. I don't remember if he says that now or he's going to say it later. Doesn't care.
Motherfucker says that every goddamn time.
So, so while Shinji's getting dragged through Nerve, Sele finally is like, you know what, just nuke the place.
Yes.
Blow it up.
I mean,
Bust
there's a
open the
line
roof
where
of
one of the
Geofront.
there's a line before they were one of the bridge bunnies, or maybe it's Fuyutsuki, is like, well, at least they haven't busted out the N2 mines
and
yet.
then the N2 mines start raining from the sky.
Yes. It's some real fucking, like, Galactic Heroes, what was that line in the movie? Like, it would take a madman to launch missiles into this, like, nebula.
And then they launch.
And immediately cuts to Reinhardt launching missiles into the nebula.
Right.
Yes.
So, while they're doing that, we catch up with Asuka, who's still sitting at the bottom of the lake in Unit 2. She starts feeling the aftershocks from the explosions, and that's kind
They start shooting like depth charges at her.
yeah, they're all, right.
Yeah,
they're also shooting
yeah.
depth charges because like they know where she is, but like you know,
Yes.
it's pretty hard to just blow up an Evangelion, right? So they start shooting depth charges, which starts to wake her up, and she's
Mm-hmm.
in.
I do want to highlight.
Go ahead.
To really quick want to highlight the Prime Minister of Japan's crazy office.
Oh my god, his fucking clock room.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
That was
this is the only
weird.
time we see the Prime Minister. It's such a weird scene, but also it's like, I guess it's like this weird acknowledgement that, oh, like, I guess a government does exist in the world of Evangelion. That it is not just technically an eternal struggle between Sele and Nerve and the Angels, but
Right. Well, I mean, technically, it's the JSDF that's conducting the raid on Nerve, right?
well, yes, but I mean that they're clearly like
Under the
being,
direction of Sele,
commanded by
Yeah.
yes.
So Asuka starts to wake up, and I guess in
Yeah.
stark contrast to Shinji, she starts repeating to herself that she doesn't want to die.
Yeah. Well, I do like this because, like, it is like we start to hear like both voices, like, her voice saying she doesn't want to die, and then also like a kind of a montage of other voices, that are, I think, implied to be her mother, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
at least based on some of the lines there. But I do like that it is not a consistent mix. Like, some of the lines are like, "You got to live, Asuka. You got to get up." But then you also have some of like the like "die with me" lines
Right.
that like
It's like
were recorded earlier in the show.
it's like she's literally having the internal conflict in her head.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, it is. Yes, and but yeah, I do. You know what? Like, fucking, this movie decides to fucking turn it on for Asuka. Asuka reminds us all why she's the best girl. Fucking, she fucking gets her shit
You
together.
finally come around, G. I've brought you around.
It only took 26 episodes and half of this stupid fucking movie. But Asuka finally is like, man, fuck this. I am going out swinging.
Yes.
And that is what she does.
She's like, I don't want to die. My mom, she realizes the connection with her mother in Unit 2 and is like, Mom's been here with me all along. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but whatever she needs to tell herself. And
right. Like, that's what I love about the scene. Is so, like, fucking Asuka's like, you know what? I finally get it. I mean, here's what I love about the scene is that in story, Asuka fucking boots up Unit 2, makes a huge cross-shaped explosion of, like, fuck you-ness, and fucking Unit 2 fucking rises out of the goddamn lake like a goddamn kaiju, fucking Pacific Rim style, lifting a fucking, like, battleship
so
over her head. Fucking,
everything in her scene in this movie is good, but
fucking, like, tosses this thing at, like, the JSDF forces. And, like, it's such a triumphant moment, but, like, because it's Evangelion, like, the thing I actually love the most about this scene is, like, so in story, Asuka's like, I finally get it. I get it. My mama's always with me. I'm invincible because I got my AT field. I'm fucking invincible. I am on top of the world. I am 10 out of 10. And the thing I love is that, like, because of who Asuka is, because we know who Asuka is, and, like, based on the, who she is and her insecurities, there's, like, a very, like, manic episode energy to this scene. like I'm not gonna say that like Asuka is bipolar, but like there's an element to the scene where like
It's
like
such a turnaround from where she was 2 minutes
Right.
ago.
yeah, but in a way that many people often do, where like
It's
again, not even remotely comparable, but like I have totally had these manic episodes, like when I'm like as an artist, as a professional like artist, like I have those days where like when I'm creative, it's just like, well, this is just a job, this is just what I'm doing, getting by day by day. But then there are those days where I'm just fucking drawing for like 16 hours straight, and like when you're in that like headspace, you're like, why the fuck? Why am I not always like this? This is sustainable. This is
right.
emotionally and mentally sustainable. Why don't I just go at 100% all the time? Like this feels great. Like I get it. I'm in the right headspace. I finally understand it. The world makes sense. I just have to stay like this 24/7. And that's what it feels like to me with Asuka. Like I don't know if Asuka's actually come to the healthy conclusion about her relationship with her mother. I don't think it's remotely healthy. But like
right.
it's just like she's like, I don't care. Like if that's the answer I have to arrive at to hit this like emotional state,
Right.
then like fuck it. Why the fuck not?
Right. It does feel like a triumphant moment until you think about it a little bit more, and it's like maybe this isn't healthy, but it's probably better than just getting blown up at the bottom of the lake, right? So
Right. Like I don't mean to take away from it. It is triumphant, but also it's just. I just love that like Asuka feels all of a sudden like so energized, but also because of like what we have seen of her character and because of what we've seen of her like internal monologuing, like I'm not sure we can even agree that she came to like the right or proper or like mentally stable conclusion
right.
here.
Either way, she wakes up and punches a missile. So
yeah, it doesn't fucking matter because she fucking axe kicks a helicopter.
Open hand slaps this helicopter.
Fucking slaps it out of the fucking sky. She's just like, motherfucker, you can't hurt me. I got an AT field. Like, do you know what that
like
means?
A giant like ICBM to the face or something. Like it's nothing.
Oh my god, yeah. I do want to start like shouting out certain names starting with this scene because like some of the greatest names to come out of Gainax like worked on like the Asuka stuff from here until the end of the fight with the mass-produced Evas. Right off the bat, I want to point out just yes. So the missile to the face shot, where Asuka just fucking takes a missile to the face and it's just
shrugs it off.
It's shrugs it off. You feel bad for the missile, like fucking one missile hits her in the head, and then a second missile comes. She just punches that missile. It's just like it's fucking nothing. Was animated by this was key animated by Yasushi Muraki. So he was a Gainax vet who kind of maybe not as big of a name as some of the others. Kind of most notably is he went on to work on stuff like Blue Gender, Eureka 7, and Star Driver. I think notably, kind of, at least as far as I know, is no longer at Kara, or at least no longer works on anything like Gainax or Ava related. But shout outs to him for this fucking amazing shot.
Got to do one of the the most famous battles in anime history here. So
yeah, we like this. I mean, specifically, it's the missile to the head shot. Right. I was like, congratulations, you worked on one of the coolest fucking shots in this whole movie.
Yeah. So yeah, Asuka is back up in action and ready to engage the JSDF forces. And as we've seen, conventional weapons do not do well against Evangelions, so she's kicking their ass. She does get her.
They do. Yeah, they cut her cable.
Yeah, she does get her cable cut like pretty early on, right. So she does not have.
Yes.
So we already know she has a limited time, but
well, like that's the great thing. That's like the great thing about like Asuka's fucking like insane like manic energy, like that she she is like because she hits such emotional lows. The fucking rebound is like unbelievable.
Oh, I guess
like
what does Asuka say here? Like.
Right, like I don't have the cable anymore, but I've got 12,000 plates of armor.
Yeah, she's like, I don't give a fuck. Like, it's so good. It's like the greater the fucking drop in her emotional state, the higher the eventual rebound. Which again, not healthy, but very fun to watch.
Pretty handy at this particular moment, at least.
Yeah.
So while Asuka is engaging the GSDF forces, we do get a shot, I think, at this point of Shinji just sitting there listening because he can hear the radio chatter.
Right, Misato is driving him to the Ava cage.
Yes,
and
during this segment,
it continues to be unaffected, just curled up into a ball. And does
Sele drops the MPA.
They don't get to the cage yet, right? At this point, I kind of lost track of it.
No, they have not actually reached the cage when the MPA was
show up. Right. So Asuka routes the standard military forces, which forces Sele's hand to bring in the mass production series of Evangelions that have...
Yes, and they're just like, fucking drop all of them. And it turns out they got
like,
fucking...
like units like, what, 6 through 13 or some shit?
Like 9 of them, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And they're like the creepiest, like, most disturbing robot designs, or they're definitely up there.
These guys fucking suck. I don't like them. Fucking weird grins
and like
the
big
lips and like these guys fucking suck, man. Like, you know what? I think it's just all the more proof. This scene is all the more proof that Nerve lost a valuable ally in Jet Alone. Imagine if Jet Alone was still operational. Could have come in with the save. Fucking, by God, that's Jet Alone's music. Jet Alone fucking jumps the top rope and tags in with Unit 02.
MPA while Unit 02 drop kicks it.
Exactly. Jet Alone should have showed up for this
flies
movie.
Across the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, we continue to... But again, great scene, because there's 9 of them. And again, Asuka's like, bitch, I got 3 minutes, 20 seconds left. That's 20 seconds for each of you motherfuckers. like she just does the math in her head. She's just like, whatever. 9 of you. It doesn't matter. Like, I still got like 3 minutes. That's more than enough time to just put you all in the dirt. And then she just fucking goes to fucking town.
Yeah, they kind of intersperse the fight throughout the next couple scenes, but it does kick off right away because she has limited time or whatever. But
she starts off with a scene that, again, want to shout out another animator here, Takashi Honda, who is a very well-established Gainax vet. He does the scene where Asuka just fucking rushes one of these motherfuckers. Like, this is like, again, like, this is like gets into like some of my favorite aspects of like good like fights in like good action movies. It's like just the physicality.
Yeah, there's a lot of brutality
just rushes
in this fight.
Just rushes one of these motherfuckers, just like starts pounding the shit out of it, lifts it above her head, fucking rips it in half above her head, and like the blood just like falls on Unit 02.
Yeah.
Like, it's like some good, just like ridiculous bloody murder. Animated by this scene specifically, animated by Takashi Honda. Kind of worked on a lot of like really famous stuff. He was the animation director for Satoshi Kon's Millennium Actress.
Okay.
Worked on at least the first Rebuild movie. I don't actually think he's worked on any of the other Rebuild movies, which I think is kind of weird and notable. Like,
right.
I don't know what that implies about like the kind of staff changes that maybe Anno went through after the first one.
Right.
He did a lot of like shots in like Kill la Kill, Nadia, Gunbuster, etc. Just like really, really well established Gainax vet.
Right.
And what a cool fucking scene.
Yeah.
But gee, the robots don't matter.
Those people could go fucking eat a dick because, like, quite frankly, the only reason I'm being so positive now is so that just like Asuka, the higher the highs, the lower the lows. It's because I am fucking as high as I can be on this movie, because after this fight scene, I am bringing the motherfucking hammer on this movie. Right. Because, fuck the rest of this movie. Like, this movie fucking...
All right, let's
This fight scene is the only fucking actual good thing about End of Evangelion. I'll just say that right now. Like, straight up.
Let's try and get through the rest of it here first, and then we can
Misato's dragging Shinji to the elevators or whatever that they need to get to.
Yes,
and
the car's been taken out. She's still fucking like just dragging this fucking limp ass Shinji.
She takes a bullet.
Yeah,
because the soldiers are still pursuing.
Yes, and manages to push herself and Shinji inside in time, but you see her like kind of propped up against the wall. You know that like, you know, everybody's watched an action movie before. You know, like this is it for her. Like,
yeah. So they do manage to get away into the elevator, and Shinji is, I guess, close enough to Unit 1 at this point. He just needs to take the final elevator ride, I think. And so Misato gives her...
Yes, but he...
Yeah, Misato gives her final speech here, basically saying it's, you know, up to Shinji to do the rest, and Shinji gives his usual, you know, I want to die, I hate myself, I can't do it, etc. stuff. And one of the things Misato said, because there's a lot of points in here that do mirror dialogue in the TV series ending. She mentioned something about, hey man, you just got to make a choice, and then you got to live with the choice, and it's your choice, right? Like something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, you know, where she leaves him at, other than the I guess the kiss at the end.
So this speech specifically, okay, so I actually really do like this speech for a lot of reasons. I think that I feel like for better or worse, we were kind of beginning to lose the thread on Misato as a character, maybe because of just like kind of how short shrifted she gets in 25 and 26. Right. And like even before that, where she kind of like loses all of her personality in the name of like her like single-minded like search for the truth of Nerve. I feel like this scene kind of represents a real like return to form for Misato that I actually really appreciated. Yeah. Like, and I don't just mean that in terms of like, oh, this is like personable, you know, goofy Misato, whatever. I mean, I feel like this is Misato like being like as real as she could be with Shinji, while still trying to be like, even in her dying moments, like the best like pseudo maternal figure. Well, maternal, but then the kiss kind of changes maybe the tone of that, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're just into that kind of thing. But I actually really do like this speech because like Misato's not even saying like, oh, Shinji, you gotta like fucking chin up. Like she's
being as real as she can because she knows she's gonna die, right? So like,
yeah, she's like, life sucks, and like, motherfucker, like Shinji, you think I know what I'm doing half the time? Like I'm just winging it too, and I make tons of mistakes, and I keep living, and like that's
how
like
life goes.
That is life, you know, and like. I really like this speech. I feel like it's very affirming. Like it's very like it's supportive, but it's supportive in a way that like is not patron. Like this is the kind of supportive speech that Shinji actually needs, right? Like it's very affirming, but it's not patronizing, and it's not like insensitive to like Shinji's very real like personal demons. This is an affirming speech that understands who Shinji is, because like at the heart of it, like Misato is maybe one of the only people in this show that actually like gets Shinji. Mm-hmm. And like as a result, it makes like Shinji's response all the more kind of infuriating, because like Shinji continues to act like, oh, like I don't fucking get you, Misato. You're just a scary adult, right? You know, like
yeah, and I kind of can't spell it out any more clear at that point, right? Because like I said, these are her like dying words. She's trying to, you know, say as much of the truth as she can say in, you know, the moments she has left to, you know, to help Shinji here. And it's frustrating when he's still, I don't know if it's that he doesn't get it or doesn't want to get it or isn't capable of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, regardless, he is not receptive. He's like barely even receptive to this speech in like any meaningful way. And like this, and then the next stuff with like Asuka and Shinji curled up in the hangar, kind of really gets into like my problems with like how Shinji has been characterized in this movie.
Yeah,
like I'm not saying that like Shinji needed to be like, wow, golly, thanks Misato, I'm fixed now. Like I didn't need that, but like,
yeah,
like conversation is a two-way street.
He just keeps sitting down.
Yeah, like he just like even in this moment that like feels like I feel like one of my biggest issues with the TV show was like kind of how poorly, you know, Asuka, Ritsuko, and Misato get treated at the end. And like, I feel like if there's anything that could be said as a slight positive in this movie is like the much better, like showing that, well, at least Asuka and Misato get it, you know? Like, and so for Shinji to just kind of like, you know, go, I'm depressed. It's like, I don't know.
It's frustrating to watch.
It's frustrating.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know if that's the thing, like, I don't know if I would change it, per se. Like, I feel like I'm okay with him being characterized that way. And in a way, it's almost I think we'll get more into this in the final thought stuff. It's almost like, you're supposed to feel or understand the self-loathing in the character, right? Like, so I don't know if I would change it, but the point is, watching it is very frustrating and hard to watch. Because he doesn't respond. I think if we're going to talk about the kiss at the end, which is like the last thing she does, I kind of always took that as nothing is getting through to him. This is like last resort.
Yeah,
but
the kiss is weird because I feel like the kiss, for better or worse, has probably led to like some very heated debates about Misato's character and like who she is as a person. Like, was the kiss intentional? Did she actually mean it? Like, is this supposed to be like an indictment of like Misato's character? Like, oh, this is the only way she knows how to connect to people. Like, I'm sure there are many like interpretations of this moment.
Yeah, I mean, when she says at the end, we'll do the rest later, she knows that's never going to happen. That she's going to die.
Right, she knows she's dying. So then is that scene meant to imply like this is Misato's like ace in the hole? Like, this is her last trump card? Like, and in that case, what does that say about her? Or is this just her trying to like? Is it just her like fucking like digging through the drawer of her like brain and trying to like at this point throw anything at the wall to see what sticks with Shinji?
I mean, it does kind of put a context on that scene a couple episodes ago where she tries to comfort him, and we were debating.
Right. Yes.
Was she implying she was going to have sex with him or something? I don't know if there's a definitive answer to any of that. It's an interesting.
And I don't think there needs to be, but
yeah.
It's I could see why it is a contentious scene. I am personally not as like. I know some people were like very opposed to that scene, because of like, the like gross pedophilia implications. Right. But I'm definitely not as opposed to it as I think some people are. But I think I understand why it is such a hotly.
It raises an eyebrow for sure.
Because for better or worse, like it does cast a weird like shadow on like Misato's character after what is such a like triumphant like because for what is otherwise like a very triumphant showing for her in this movie.
Right. So yeah, and those are Misato's last actions. She shoves Shinji into the elevator, slams the button, and
gives her gives him her necklace.
Yes, he gives him the her cross necklace, and kind of slowly bleeds out, and her moments, but and then explodes.
Well, yes, yes, we do get a quick shot where is this where we see Rei for like a split second?
So pretty much every time somebody's going to die in the next couple of scenes, you're going to see Rei floating over their bodies in their final moments.
Right.
So we do. I forget what I do want to just mention, because Shinji gets shoved in the elevator, and I forget at what point we see him again. When he gets down to Unit 1,
it's covered in the
so I think
in the
I don't know.
Yes.
I was wondering, like, would he have gotten in Unit 1 if he could, or now he just sees it's covered in bakelite and there's nothing he can do about it. Either way,
right. I always personally kind of saw it as he sees it's covered and assumes, oh well, I can't do anything. Let me
just continue to give up.
Yeah,
rather than necessarily like trying to do something.
I guess I think the charitable take is definitely. It says a lot that this is my charitable take on this scene, is that Shinji sees the bakelite and is like, he immediately gives, or he at least
it gives him an excuse.
He immediately gives up because it gives him an excuse to give up.
Like, oh no, like covered in bakelite, I guess.
Like, like at the first sign of resistance, he just immediately like just crumbles again. And I think that frankly, I think the more my personal take on this is that like. Misato's affirming, hopeful speech completely failed and fell on deaf ears. And like at the end of the day, Shinji is just too fucking broken.
Yeah.
To like even if the Ava was not covered in the bakelite, do we know if like Shinji would have even bothered?
Once it freaks out and breaks it itself, and he does get into it.
Well, he kind of
Yeah, but like, well, the reason why I say that is because like this entire time we are hearing on the intercom that Asuka is fighting for her
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
and Shinji doesn't even respond to
Yeah,
that. Like, despite all of Shinji's claims of, oh no, Asuka, you're the only one who gets me, you're the only one worth fighting for, you're the only person I want
it's
to, like,
completely
save.
selfish.
Like, even when he hears her struggling, he doesn't do anything. Like, in the car, he doesn't respond to, like, Asuka suddenly being okay again. And then here, again, with the intercom in the hangar, he doesn't do anything.
Like,
Like, he just
what could he have done to get into it? I guess is kind of my
But
question.
that's the thing. Why didn't we? We could have at least had a scene of him like futilely struggling to try and like remove the Bakelite, but he doesn't even do that. Like we just see him immediately just fucking slump over and
Yeah,
give up, and that is why like I
it's
really like
tough. That part was particularly tough because, like you said, he at this time they're cutting into Asuka's fight with her making her last stand,
yes,
and he's hearing what's going on out there, and we're seeing what's going on out there. She's kicking everybody's ass in like this miraculous
yeah.
1v9 fight where she's
Dog, it's fucking cool
where
as shit.
she's
This is some. This is
snapping
some.
people's necks and like,
Yeah. Like, again, I want to shout out a few more animators that worked on this scene. I'll say I'm saving the best for last, of course. But so we have a great shot here where Ava Unit 2 is like grappling with one of the mass produced Avas, and we finally see what lives in the right fin or the right fin of Unit 02. This thing opens up, shoots some motherfucking spikes out of it into the head of one of the mass produced Avas. This scene was animated by Nobutoshi Ogura, whose probably most famous other scene is the shot in Fooly Cooly where Naota is holding the guitar and Mamimi takes the photo.
it's a good shot.
We also have Mitsuo Iso, director of Den-O Coil. He did the part where Asuka grabs one of those fucking like double bladed spears from one of the other units and like
glaive things or something.
just chopping motherfuckers up, chopping off arms, chopping off legs, just fucking it's some good shit. And then of course, fucking maybe in a man with already a fucking legendary storied career, maybe some of the best shots this man has ever done. The one, the only, you already know who he is, Yo Yoshinari.
Gainax's young ace.
He did he's Gainax's young ace. He did the fucking box cutter knife fight against the MP Avas. Again, very fucking cool. Fucking stabbing that, like, fucking wrangling that motherfucker under the lake and just fucking stabbing it, fucking breaking off the blade, like, fucking pulling out a new blade is some good shit. And then at the very end of this fight, also Yo Yoshinari is, she sees she got like 15 seconds left, fucking punches through one MP Ava into another MP Ava, fucking grabbing at its core, fucking like her life depends on it, which it does, and fucking just trying to rip this thing out, fucking screaming top of her lungs, some real fucking, like, some real good gumbuster shit here, just fucking trying to crush this thing, crush this S2 engine that has got in his chest. And then also, fucking another spear comes in from behind her. She fucking blocks that shit with the AT field, initially like it's fucking nothing. And then we find out that, oh no, these, like, double-headed spears are actually MP lances of Longinus?
Yeah,
they somehow managed to mass produce that thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think at some point they imply it's still not as good as the real thing, of course, but
no, but it manages to get through Asuka's AT field, fucking gets her in the eye.
Yeah. Before we get to the,
it's such a.
I just want. Yeah. So that fight's going on. Like I said, this keeps getting interspersed between a lot of stuff because they do get to before we get to Asuka's like final end of the fight. We do get the bit with Ritsuko's final scene, where she is she finds Gendo and Rei down in Terminal Dogma, and I guess she
with Lilith,
just hanging out, and she I guess has rigged the place to self-destruct. She is ready to get her final revenge on Gendo, and she pushes the button, And of course, the Magi rejects her.
No, yes, and specifically, it is Caspar that I think represents the woman.
So her mother
that betrays the mother and the scientist. I guess. Fucking. I don't like this scene. This gets back into like why I fucking actually kind of hate this movie on some level. Like,
I mean, there's also just the I don't like what they do with Ritsuko's character.
That's what I mean. Like, this is such a raw fucking deal for Ritsuko. I really don't like this. Like, this sucks. I really think this sucks. Like, this scene here. So, to give some context, right? So basically, Gendo is in a narrator like, we gotta do the thing, and Ritsuko's like, and then the computer that represents the woman of the three pillars of a human being rejects it. Decides to save Gendo at the cost of Ritsuko, and it just gets back into like the whole like women. Am I right, guys?
Yeah.
Like it's like Ritsuko, like everything that Ritsuko achieved.
Women are like the smartest people on the planet, but in the end, they're undone by their womanly desires or whatever.
Yeah, it just fucking sucks, man. Like, I'm not even saying like Ritsuko was like the best character in this show, but like.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would say she deserves better, but thematically,
she deserves better. She does deserve better. I'm not saying she deserves a happy ending. She deserves a better ending than this, where like she fucking like it fails, she gives up. Fucking Gendo is like, Ritsuko, actually, and then like mouths some words that we don't like hear, and like Ritsuko's like, you're a liar, Gendo. Gets shot by Gendo, falls into the pool of LCL. Just like,
maybe she did deserve better, but
deserved better than this.
So,
and
as between Asuka, Masato, and Ritsuko, we kind of get them all in a row to bring us up to our Act 2 low point before we get into the second episode. Mm-hmm. So we come out of Ritsuko's final moments into Asuka's fight wrapping up, where she's running out of time.
I do want to point out real quick, just because I have to mention it. This is the scene where Rei starts to fall apart, right?
I don't.
That's in this.
We're getting close.
Okay,
but it's going to be the same.
I'll bring that up later. Sorry.
Setting and everything. Right?
All right. So, like, right after Asuka gets completely torn apart by the MP Ava's, Unit 01 breaks the backlight. Only after all that shit can Shinji get robot.
Only after Asuka has been. So, I just want to maybe bring it up more. But so Asuka's last stand comes to an end, and all of the MP Avas. Turns out that all those MP Avas that she so badassedly took out can regenerate.
They have S2 engines, and she does not.
Yes, and so they come back to life. They all got this fucking crooked, evil grin on their faces, and then they just descend upon her like a pack of vultures.
This
is traumatizing. This is fucked up. You see you see the reaction of the bridge bunnies to this scene, and it's awful. There are entrails, there's gore,
they completely eviscerate Unit 2.
Yes, Unit 2 is just being ripped.
Asuka can't do anything because she has no power left.
Yeah.
And they just rub the salt in by the end, because she's still alive at the end, and she's still
fucking props to Asuka, right? So she's getting all this pain feedback to her.
She's still conscious and fighting.
After Unit 2 has been completely ripped apart, she is still there. She's still conscious, and she is still angry. She's reaching up towards the sky.
She starts to move Unit 2, I think one of the bridge bunnies even says, it's Berserker, they're starting to move Unit 2.
Yeah, so they imply that, basically Unit 2 has entered the same Berserk mode that Unit 1 did in episode 22.
It's just 22. In very bad shape at this point.
But, it's too late. It's too little too late. Unit 2 has been so thoroughly ripped apart that, even if Unit 2 has suddenly found its Berserk second wind, activated by whatever protected instincts of the spirit of her mother, blah, 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 it doesn't matter. It's too late. And,
just to seal the deal, they all, rain down their lances on the body.
Yeah. Her hand splits apart in, a very, weird way. You don't see blood and bone. It just, splits it's clay.
It's almost like some kind
and
of
just
metaphorical thing or something. I don't know, but
yeah, and just the body is just pierced, I guess, 9 times
yeah.
by
So
the lances of the MP Avas.
it's a brutal ending.
Yeah, and so I just want to get that through because it is only after Asuka's tragic death that Shinji suddenly finds the willpower to fucking get his
Well, I
shit
think
together.
Unit 1 finds the willpower. I don't know how much that has to do with Shinji.
I guess Unit 1 does, yeah, not Shinji.
So, because Unit 1 decides to wake up now and starts breaking out of the Bakelite by itself, and that gets Shinji moving once he sees Unit 1 moving, and he finally gets in the robot. But, of course, it's too late at this point. He gets up to the surface and sees the, like, viscera remaining of Unit 2. It's like not even a body or anything at this point. It's just
I mean, I feel like the implication. I guess it's interesting because like Shinji is like shown horrified by this, but because he was able to hear Asuka's voice on the intercom, I feel like he probably should have known.
Well, I think he knew, but maybe just the shock of actually seeing it was a lot worse.
And that's true. Anyways, like before we kind of move on to what happens next here, like where Unit 1 starts to do its thing, like here's where I kind of want to get into like why I think this movie really bothers me. Like, I feel like we've kind of been talking about this, and is it not an unreasonable like take to say that like perhaps a lot of the like misattributed like contempt and like hatred for Shinji as a character that is often like found in like mainstream like audiences is a lot of this because of End of Eva? Because
sure, I mean, it's the last thing people saw, right?
Yeah, because here's the thing, right? Like, everybody knows about the stereotype, like, oh, Shinji's a pussy, why doesn't he just fuck these girls and get in the robot, right? Like, everybody knows of that, like, tired, dreadful old take on Shinji. And, like, watching the TV show, I, despite my fact that, I don't love everything about the TV show, I eventually came to the conclusion, like, Shinji does not deserve, like, that kind of shit. Like, Shinji is a multifaceted character with a lot of different aspects to him, and, like, the reasons for his reluctance to pilot the robot, the reasons for his anxieties and fear, the reasons for his depression, I think are well-founded and they're well-supported in the TV series. I feel like the movie is almost just, like, exaggerating all of Shinji's most negative, like, traits until, like, they are the only aspects of his character in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really see much more from him because he'll spend the back half of the movie kind of sitting in a chair, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean. Is like imagine like every single like stereotype that is like unfairly thrown at Shinji. I feel like he lives up to them in the movie version. Like he's too passive, he's too weak. Like he won't get in the robot until it's too late. Like he's this depressed, like passive sad sack that like takes almost no initiative on his own in this movie. All of the things that are like maybe unfairly attributed to him in the TV series, he lives up to in this movie. And maybe that is why it's so frustrating to watch this. Is like Shinji is just such a fucking sad sack of shit in this movie. To the point where like I feel like it even goes past like how he was ever characterized in the TV series.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes along with what we were saying earlier, where it does feel like we could have used some extra buffer there of the how did he get this far? Because I do think you could see Shinji getting to this point, the Shinji from the TV series, but we didn't see the path there from the end of episode 24 to here. I mean, like Ira said earlier, given another couple episodes of showing the decline, maybe it would have made sense. But yeah, it is, and it's funny because I don't really think I thought about it that way when I was the first time I watched it, and maybe that's just my memory being fuzzy at this point. But
I think it's just like watching the movie so close after the show.
It is true. Like, it is, yeah, because like you said, I watched End of Evangelion a couple years after the TV series, so maybe, and that ended up being, my perception of Shinji because that's the last thing I saw, which I think happens with a lot of people. So maybe that has something to do with it too. But
like, I don't know. Like, for me, it's like, so I never like liked Shinji as a character, but I liked what he represented as a character in the TV series. I think he was well done. I think he was well written. And I don't think that's the case with the movie version. And I guess it's just hard for me to tell, like, is that Anno's point? Are there people out there who are arguing, like, well, because all the fans shit on Shinji, like, Anno decided to just, like, go full fuck you to the fans and double down on Shinji. And it's like, if that was his intent, like, I guess good job, but it doesn't make for, like, good or likable media.
Well, I will say something in movie Shinji's defense, but I think we'll get to that later in episode 26. So let's keep the train moving. I did want to mention there is actually an intermission in here, even though it's like an 84-minute movie or something like that.
Yes.
End credits for episode 25.
Yeah. And Anno gave some weird shout out to all the people, including 5 women.
5 specific women.
That helped him or something. That was kind of weird, but whatever. Also, I just find it funny that they have an intermission on a less than 90-minute movie, but
I believe A Death and Rebirth also.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
More movies could use intermissions.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, anyway, I guess at the very end of 25, we start seeing the setup of Unit 1's crucifixion and all that, right? Or no, wait, that's right. We just see it grow the evil anime wings.
The wings
it had in the opening, but not in the trailer.
and then we'll get to the crucifixion bit in a minute. But so episode 26 kicks off, which has, I think, many different titles, but I picked there's Sincerely Yours, and then the final part is I Need You. And we come back to Gendo with Rei back in Terminal Dogma, standing by Lilith. And if we recall, Gendo had merged Adam grafted onto his hand or whatever. And it's time to merge with Rei to kick off Third Impact, and he can finally see Yui again. And, while he's doing that, that's when the mass production units start setting up Unit 1. I'm just going to say now, I feel like there's not like as much to talk about in episode 26 because a lot of it is just like the visual.
There really isn't, and I'm not like even that interested.
Yeah, in so we'll just get through it here. They start setting up the blatant crucifixion imagery of Unit 1, impaling him with their lances and all that and then
fucking gives him the stigmata,
the floating tree of Sephiroth. And
they
all that.
create the tree of whatever, and that's been on Gendo's floor in his office this whole time. And so while they're doing that, Rei actually rejects Gendo, which the only reason I like this is because the only time we see Gendo.
Finally. Yeah, eat shit, Gendo.
The only time we see Gendo lose his cool.
The fucking one and only time in this whole damn series, but
Rei decides she would rather merge with Shinji than Gendo and rejects Adam, and instead joins up with Lilith, the giant who has grown back after having the lance removed and whatnot. And then Lilith, once they merge, they turn into Giant Naked Rei, or GNR as the Evangelion wiki calls her. And when I mean giant, I mean like the size of the planet.
Yeah, like planet sized, like some choking Gurren Lagann shit,
If things were not getting weird already, they're going to get really weird now. So Giant Naked Rei floats up to, I guess, present herself to merge with Unit 1 and let's kick off, Third Impact or whatever. Shinji is freaking out at this point.
Shinji is still completely passive in all of this.
I think given the circumstances, I'll give him a pass on freaking out at this point because it's some weird stuff going on. Because at this point, he's floating in space,
Yeah.
and then a giant naked Ray who's the size of the planet
It is
rises up.
it is undeniably some weird shit. It's just annoying that like Shinji himself is like basically just a plot device
Yeah,
for like
he's
the
like
next
the key in the
30
keyhole,
minutes.
basically, at this point, right? Like, so he's freaking out and is not welcoming Ray to become one or whatever, and so she changed. So I guess Lilith changes forms to look like Karu instead, and he instantly gives in, so that Karu can pierce his S2 engine. And so, once that happens, I guess this is technically when Third Impact starts. And it's all basically, I forget who says it, but it's basically up to Shinji what's going to happen now. And we dive back into his head, similar to, we go through a sequence which is a slightly nicer looking version of some of the things we saw in the TV series at the end. At least they animated it, right? Including a like 10-minute sequence of little baby Shinji playing in the sandbox for like and getting mad and angry,
or like soundstage or whatever. And
yeah, we get another bit after that with primarily Masato. This is another one that mirrored what was happening in 26, where Masato is kind of freaking out that everybody's seeing everything, including Shinji watching her having sex with Kaji, a little more graphically this time. For the movies, and generally talking about the idea that now everybody's merging together. We can all see our whatever.
Can all become one, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and then they randomly throw in some crayon drawings. I don't know, man.
Again, I did not particularly care much for this part.
There's some like,
and now that like Asuka and Shinji can speak for the first time in several episodes, they kind of just rail on each other for a while.
Yeah, there's some back and forth as they're arguing the themes again.
I mean, again, it's kind of like, I feel like, again, like I know it's intentional, but just it continues to get into this aspect of like just like this way they have like completely like, I don't know.
Now what I want
done Shinji dirty as a character, I guess, where like Shinji's like, again, like doing what he was saying at the beginning of this movie, he was like begging Asuka to like, I don't know. I don't even know what Shinji wants from Asuka at this point. Like it's all just like so like muddled at,
yeah,
and like I think that she gets it right off the bat, where she's just like, you're fucking pathetic.
They have the bit in the scene where she basically kicks his ass, right? Like
yeah, fucking pushing him over.
Yeah, pushing him into like the pot of coffee or something like that, or whatever was happening there. And yeah, so that all, like I said, breaks down into weird abstract stuff again. We had the crayon drawings, and then like an uncomfortably long scene of like jumbled images doing nothing for like several minutes. And I think
I'm sure some sad sack out there has fucking done a fucking video essay or written a thesis on like every single image in that montage.
I don't know about that. This was worse than the black and white photos in episode 26 previously. I don't know if there's anything to even find in there, but you're right.
I mean, I suppose this scene is proof that like maybe some of this was just Ano running out of money, and maybe some of this is just fucking bullshit.
I do have to wonder if we wanted to add another layer to that question of how much was intentional at the end of this TV series. I would imagine they had more resources and time to animate what they wanted in the movie, but now were they being influenced by what they did in the TV series, where they had to like keep up that like?
I want to see the version of this movie that was just actually them doing episode 25 and 26 with a normal budget.
Because 25 is pretty literal, but like 26 it ends up being weird again. But yeah, we get that jumbled image montage thing, and I think somewhere around there is when they start slowly fading in the famous "Tumbling Down" song.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's two good things about End of Evangelion. The really great fight scenes and just top-notch technical presentation of this film across the board by the many hardworking and talented animators that work at Gainax. And Calm Sister Todd is a real fucking banger of a track.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Really good track. Just it's weirdly catchy.
It's kind of upbeat, almost like a gospel song type of thing. Like, It's I think they're trying to contrast the concept of like, I don't know, like the rapture or something versus what's actually happening, which is like the apocalypse, end of the world. Which makes for some fun, quote unquote fun.
I mean, I can appreciate that they portray Third Impact or Human Instrumentality or whatever as like this properly horrifying event.
Because at this stage, so I think it's implied at this point, if I'm interpreting correctly, that Shinji just decides that he's alone and everybody should die. And that's when literally everybody dies, right? Like, or everybody starts dying. Like, you start seeing like millions of like crosses floating up from the planet or whatever.
The rays start coming for people.
Yeah, the rays start coming for people. So we see miraculously the bridge crew is still alive at this point, and
somehow. Not for much longer,
they get to last to the very final moment when the rays come to get them and they explode into Tang.
Well, and also things that some of the rays appear as like, I guess the implication is like they appear as the person that
you care about the most or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yes. So like, Fuyutsuki sees Yui, Hyuga sees Misato, Maya sees Ritsuko, and again, proving that air guitar guy is the best, that he is actually perhaps maybe in some ways the true unspoken hero of the story, that actually maybe air guitar guy is actually the only person on this planet who actually knows the true shape of reality, is hiding under the desk and cowering from a horde of rays. Maybe once again proving that maybe that air guitar guy gets that actually he will not be swayed by the illusions of this horrifying apocalyptic event, that he sees the true face of human instrumentality, and he fears it.
Like Gendo kind of gets his comeuppance here.
Gendo, however, does not get to turn to goo.
They kind of lay it out for him that you're just as bad, like Shinji turned out just like you because you refused to like.
Yeah, he says all the stuff.
Act like a father.
And right.
I like Gendo starts fucking trying to bust out the same excuses. Shinji's like, well, when I talk to people, they hate me and I'm scared. And it's like, fucking like, tough shit, asshole. Like, you're a father. Like, yeah, and, look at all the fucking harm you caused.
Just bite him in half. Yeah, you don't get to be
Yui.
Yui's
not
just
even
gonna
his corpse
kill
turns
you.
into goo.
Right.
Fuck you.
Yeah, it's a good bit. I will admit, it's a good bit.
Yep. So everybody dies, and there's lots of sex metaphors in here somewhere.
All the MPAs gray faces.
Oh yeah, I didn't even mention that. That's super creepy because they all grow ray faces, and then once everyone's dead, they impale themselves in ecstasy with their lances.
Yeah, that's certainly the way that she's voicing it.
And there's a lot of other blatant imagery that are like not so subtle sex metaphors
on giant naked ray stuff.
Yes. And Unit 1 entering a giant naked ray.
It's kind of the vibe I got out of this.
Yeah. And this bleeds into more artsy stuff. We got our mandatory artsy live action sequence.
Man flipping off camera.
So, yes, specifically, like a large part of these live action sequences are shots of a theater, and I think the implication being that these are, meant to represent you, the viewer. Like a mirror.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Iro, but from what I remember hearing, didn't they actually like film that before the movie? Like the original
those are from showings of Death and Rebirth.
Oh, from Death. Okay,
right.
Yeah, I was like, were they cutting that in the back movie? Was that why there was an intermission?
And and I guess like this is certainly why I see why some people could come to the like conclusion that like all of End of Evangelion is supposed to be like
Right,
Ano lashing out at his like
right. We get like
quote,
flashes also of like graffiti
base
on the guy next studio and like messages he got that were death threats and stuff.
Yeah, mixed in with like B-roll of like normal daily life and like naked women and
yes, and then like a Masato, Asuka and Rei cosplayer.
So I don't know if any of that actually means anything, or
that's the thing. That's a problem. Is like for me is like even if we assume that like okay, End of Evangelion very much is meant to be like a big fuck you at the audience, it still doesn't work because there are too many parts of this movie that are gratuitous. And I don't mean gratuitous in like a violent or sex way. I mean gratuitous in like a self-indulgent way. That like if this movie truly were meant to be like a subversion of the fan base's expectations, truly meant to be like a condemnation, like it was truly meant to be Ano condemning the audience and the fan base. There's still too many parts of this that like relish in like relish in its own like accomplishments.
If Ano really wanted to piss off the fans, he would have done what Ikuhara told him to do and made Rei pregnant at the end of the movie. But sadly, he did not choose to do that. Anyway,
the way it was always explained to me when I was watching, like back a decade ago, was that this is like the show's 29-26 happening like right here, this part of the movie, which like would watch it now seems a little bullshit to me.
That again, that just seems like another in a long line of like, of like Eva fans desperately trying to like create meaning where they're clearly maybe there was some meaning, but it is not the meaning that these fans are looking for.
So yeah, the live action stuff happens, and we come back out of that to everybody floating around naked, Rei's on top of Shinji.
Well, they're not really floating here.
So at this point, they're
the ocean of LCL or whatever, right?
Yeah, at this point, and Shinji's kind of grasping the concept of instrumentality and how everybody's one now and everybody's happy because we're all connected and sharing our thoughts and blah, blah, blah. And okay, so we'll get to, we'll get to that in a minute. Shinji at this point is like, this doesn't seem right though. And he's still presented with a choice that if he wants to go back to being alive, so to speak, he can do that. He still has the choice to do that if he has
the ability to turn off instrumentality, basically.
Right. If he so chooses. And apparently he makes the choice to come back. And it kind of leads us to our final scene, another scene that had a lot open to people's interpretation or whatever, where he's washed up on the beach of somewhere. World looks like it's in rough shape, understandably.
Yes, there's the ocean is red.
The giant dead Rei. Oh, because Rei died after the giant naked Rei died and like literally deteriorated in extremely graphic manner. So like,
yes, her head in this version of the scene looks a lot worse than the version of the Rei head you see in like the End of Eva poster,
literally like falls in half, right? And then
it's in much worse shape than the.
I remember seeing the cover to the movie, which has like the picture. It's the final scene with Asuka and Shinji on the beach looking at the giant Rei head, and I'm thinking, oh, that's just some sort of like design choice thing. I was not expecting it to be like extremely literal by the end of the.
Yeah, I mean the things like that. The Rei head in that cover is like she's just straight chilling. She's like kind of smiling even. She's like, "Yo, what's good, guys? Like I'm fucking God or some shit." Yeah, but like the actual version of the scene, she's just like, "No, I'm fucking straight up dead here."
Gross, so. But so Shinji wakes up on the beach. Asuka is there with him. She's bandaged up from her arm exploding or whatever. and
Also has an eye patch
her
or
eyes
a
are eyes
bandage. On her
bandaged.
eye.
All the spots we saw her get directly injured in the fight, and then
Yeah.
yeah, and so I guess he chose to come back, and he goes over to Asuka and tries to choke her out.
Starts strangling her,
which wakes up Asuka, and before she gets totally choked out, she just kind of gently puts her hand up and touches his face, and he starts crying. And she's gets one of the final line of the show in, how, what did she say? How disgusting or something. She's disgusted with him all over again, and that's where we end the entire series. That's how Evangelion ends.
Yep. And
so I did want to talk about the two endings again here, because we talked about in the Platinum Notes how they said if the TV series is presenting the themes directly or whatever, whereas the End of Evangelion is a little more literal, which you could argue that, especially in 26. I think they're meant to portray essentially the same events except the final scene, right? Like, I always interpret it as the TV series, because they do say it's too specific, it's two different endings. So I always interpreted the TV series as Shinji choosing to be a part of Instrumentality, and that's the congratulations scene.
I guess.
Whereas at the end of this is what he chooses to reject Instrumentality and comes back to life or whatever. That's the way I was
think about it that way.
I don't know.
I don't know if I can. Yeah, okay. I agree.
Well, what are your guys' thoughts on, I guess, the ending? But that was kind of the way I always thought about it.
I mean,
do you care at this point? With
not.
I guess is
the thing. The ending to the TV series has always seemed more like emotionally fulfilling to me, but I guess it's supposed to, compared to whatever the hell's at the end of this movie. Right.
I think it's more emotionally consistent.
I think even in interviews, Tsurumaki or whoever has said the movie End of Evangelion emotionally is disconnected from the show.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Tsurumaki is an intelligent individual and continues to show that maybe that man actually holds the true heart of Gainax in him.
Right, let's just move on then to that general overall concept of, what are your feelings on this movie, and is it a satisfying conclusion?
So, I'm gonna, if you'll allow me, I do want to talk about the ending a little bit more, but I will loop that into my overall feelings on End of Evangelion. And so I was not really in love with End of Evangelion across the board, other than the cool fight scenes, which again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm a simple person, but it's more like the fight scenes are the only part of this movie that I think are morally and morally and emotionally uncompromised by the rest of this movie's thematic failings in my eye. I think the ending, however, really sinks my opinion of this movie in a way that I was perhaps not quite expecting, even though I know the ending of or I knew of the End of Evangelion. Because it feels not only totally inconsistent, it almost feels mean-spirited in a way that feels kind of spiteful in an unnecessary way. To elaborate on that, so I know there are many interpretations of Evangelion's endings, both the TV series and the movie, so I'm not going to act like mine is fucking, me 20 years later. Don't worry, guys, I solved the formula on Evangelion. I figured it out. I solved the case. But, the interpretation I always got from Evangelion, based on the ending of episode 26, is that even if life is hard, even if you struggle with depression, there is validity in struggling. I feel like that is kind of what Shinji kind of gets into at the end of 26, is I am going to continue to live, because even if living is hard, even if life itself is a struggle, that struggle is worth it, because
life.
a struggle implies life and a hope. Because here's the thing. I think that the end of Evangelion, the TV series, is in some ways intrinsically hopeful for people with depression, in the sense of like, it is not saying, don't worry, you'll fix it someday. Like, it isn't saying that. It is in fact a much more, and this ties into Misato's speech in the movie, that like, life will not get easier. Life will not necessarily get better, but tomorrow will come if you continue to live.
Right.
Like, and it may hurt, but in some ways, the possibilities of tomorrow, does that not make it worth the
movie
struggle?
kind of gestures at this, like, when he decides to like recorporealize out of the ocean.
Yeah, so he rejects instrumentality. I was like, oh, okay, this is actually weirdly hopeful in a way. Like, Shinji will return to real life, despite everything he has endured in this movie, despite how much of a sad piece of shit he's been this whole movie. At least Shinji will return to the real world. He will not retreat into escapism. He will stop curling up into a ball. He will live. But then I almost feel like that exact message is then directly contradicted by his actions in the last minutes of the movie, where Shinji's like, actually, I just wanted to come back to life so I could choke the life out of Asuka. And it's like, what is the point of that scene then? Like, we don't see any other human being. We only see Asuka and Shinji.
The most, I think, contended point for interpretation is, why does he choke Asuka at the end?
Right. Why does he come back to life if just to fucking harm Asuka?
So,
like, what is the point? Why does Anno decide to end it on this scene? Like, it's such a like mean-spirited, cruel moment. Like, on both their parts, right? I'm sorry. Okay, I'll finish real quick. It's just like, Shinji is like, without a word, he's just like, no explanation given. Like, he is strangling Asuka, but ostensibly to death. Like, he brought her back to life. He used his fucking instrumentality god powers to bring back Asuka back to life so he could kill her. Like, is that supposed to be, oh, that's what being human is? Like, that you can hate a person that much that, like, you cannot live with the idea of them living in, like, this eternal, like, oneness with the rest of the world? Like, no, I'm bringing you back to life. I'm giving you back your individuality so that I can take it away from you. And then on Asuka's part, like, where she just says, like, so disgusting. Like, whether that is like the situation or that's Shinji himself, like, it's just, all in all, it just feels so based on like what had happened just like literally minutes prior. Right? These very, yeah, it feels so mean spirit. It feels like Anno's like, ha, you thought you were gonna get a helpful ending? Nah, fuck you one more time. And then it's like, why?
So, okay, a couple things I would say. Did Shinji wish Asuka back, or did she wish herself back? Because they do say if anybody wants to come back, they just need to have the will to live, or something like that. So I'm assuming that implies other people will be coming back at some point. That's what I took it as. And we know Asuka definitely didn't want to die, right? But there's that. I don't think there's a definitive answer to the whole choking thing, but I saw it as an extension of the last time we saw them together was where in that scene her out. Yeah. Where he's choking her. And it's almost like he doesn't, I don't know if he fully understands that he's back in reality yet until she touches his face, and then he realizes, oh, I'm back in reality. And
he does.
Right, but he doesn't stop choking her after
she touches his face, he stops squeezing and starts crying. Yeah.
Okay, I guess he loosens up a bit.
Right, but he's not. He stops like applying pressure, and that's when he starts crying. And because he realizes, oh, this is real now. So that's. I don't think there was anything deep there to the like commenting on just the nature of man or something or whatever. But I think it.
Oh, really? Yeah. Are you sure? Because I feel like that's a lot of what Otto's trying to do in this whole stupid movie.
That is just I guess showing where Shinji is at coming out of the instrumentality and reestablishing the connection between these two and whatever is going to happen going forward. So that was my interpretation of the choking, because it does almost like feel like a continuation of the last scene they were in earlier in the movie. But again, I don't know. I don't think anybody does, and it has been one of the more talked about, debated, questioned, analyzed, whatever sequences in the series.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Is I think that many people get this idea in their head that, oh, a good piece of fiction should be ambiguous. It should make you argue. Like, you should argue with a work, and that makes it a good piece of fiction. But in that case, what does the ambiguity of this final scene even mean to serve? Because I think that when you talk about shows and fiction with ambiguous themes and messages, you also need to ask what questions are they asking then? And I don't think that the questions End of Evangelion is asking in its final scenes are even that valuable or interesting.
Yeah, I will agree that a lot of End of Evangelion is, I'm not going to say fluff, but it's too it's the wrong mood to say fluff, but that's kind of what I mean, where it's kind of more for show, or a lot of set
dressing. And there's nothing wrong with good set dressing. I mean, that fight is basically really good set dressing. But
was it even necessary to make this movie? Like, we kind of already hammered home all the themes.
I'm beginning to really wonder that after watching this movie.
We kind of already, and this extends to our previous conversation of why I've never watched the rebuild or whatever they call the new movies, because I don't feel like we've hammered to death the message of Evangelion at this point.
Right. And so that is why, I don't want to get to, I know, death of the author and all that stuff, but I feel like this is why it is so important to, interrogate Anno's intent. Because, okay, let's say that End of Evangelion is Anno addressing the fans and his final word on Evangelion. I think I could accept that version of the story if Anno never worked on anything Evangelion related ever again. I think I could accept that explanation if this is if End of Evangelion is the last thing we ever hear about Evangelion, and we all just kind of talk, 20 years in retrospect, being like, man, Anno really chose a really flawed and interesting and bitter way to end the story. I think that there is some value in having that conversation about talking about about End of Eva as a bookend. But then he made the rebuild movies. So was he even happy with the End of Evangelion? Was that even his actual final word? Or what does he even want?
Right.
With
is he ever going to be satisfied with it?
Right.
I don't know. I guess the only other thing I would say, and I think this is one of the things I'm going to get into when we get to the second half of this episode, when we get into our final thoughts. I do think a lot of the set dressing and everything is about creating a mood and a feeling, and you can debate whether or not that's good or bad. But I think Anno wants you to feel a certain way, or let's put it this way. I think he wants you to share his feelings, whether it's about himself or what he's going through. And, we can debate whether or not he's done a good job of that, or, if I don't want to say if what he did was the right way to go about it or whatever, but was it a good, good way of going about it? But I think we will definitely get into that in our final thoughts section. Do you guys have any other parting words for the movie itself? Iro, did you want to share any specific thoughts on your rewatch of the movie?
I feel like I used to think that if you're okay, I mean, on some level, I still believe that if you're gonna watch Evangelion, you should also watch End of Evangelion. But I think after this most recent go through the whole thing, I would have been totally fine not watching End of Evangelion after the show.
Yeah. I agree, because I feel like my whereas my opinion of the TV series I feel like really held up, my opinion on End of Evangelion did not quite hold up as well. Watching it,
like obviously on some
many years
level
later.
it's part of the full experience. That's why we're doing it. But also do you,
Yes,
yeah.
I
But also, like,
I do
if
not
you
regret
want
watching this.
what Evangelion is selling, you don't need this movie. I don't think.
I guess that's the thing, though, right? Like, I mean, we're not going to have this conversation right now, but like, Otto probably wants you to watch End of Evangelion. I can only assume he
Who
probably
even
would insist
knows
that this
anymore?
is like vital. I mean, whatever. Fucking Otto would probably also
Let me
Otto would probably insist that like Rebirth and Death and the Rebuild movies are also vital to the Ava experience. So maybe his opinion isn't worth jack shit. But
Yeah, sure,
like,
but
you know, like I am glad
you
I
know what
watched
I'm
this
saying.
movie. But
let me put this question out there: would it have been better if you just eliminated 25 and 26 of the TV series and replaced it with this?
no, I don't actually think so. I don't. Y'all can go back and listen to me. I was not exactly high on 25 and 26. It really speaks to my feelings about End of Evangelion that I look back on 25 and 26 a fair bit more fondly now.
I
in
genuinely like
retrospect.
episode 26.
Like,
but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah,
and maybe it is just as technically deficient as 25 and 26 are. They still thematically fit like right in with everything that was going on in this show.
That's sticking point.
Fair to say.
Is that
it
doesn't really follow from the show.
Yeah,
like tonally or emotionally. Like even if the like literal events that are occurring were clearly planned in advance and were supposed to happen at the end of the TV show, like all of the context around them is irrevocably different.
I think like mainly Shinji. I don't know if anybody. I don't know if all the other stuff is really that much different. But well,
I feel like for me it is
point a lot
definitely
specifically,
Shinji.
but I feel like that's like the worst portion of it. So
yeah. Like, for better or worse, like, you know, Misato, the way Misato acts in this movie is relatively consistent to her character. Asuka is as well in the grand scheme of things. Her bounce back is pretty dramatic, but, like, it is still within the scope of, like, who she is as a character. Unfortunately, how Ritsuko is treated in this movie is consistent with how she was treated in the TV series. I really do think it's just, like, I think the primary sticking point I have with this movie is how Shinji is written.
Yeah. I do have to wonder, is it like, is it Anno just being like, hey guys, you didn't really get it. I really hate myself.
But like, it's like, I guess that's a thing is like, again,
yeah,
I don't want to we're running long here, but like, you know, like, I feel like, yeah, I guess it's just, I feel like it's like, I feel like Shinji went from a character in the TV series who was a character who is with depression into the movie version. Yeah, who was just like, oh, I'm just the walking embodiment of depression. I'm the metaphor for depression. And it's like, one of those is easy to empathize. Again, even if I don't like, you know, like emotionally like Shinji as a character in the original TV series, I can like empathize and sympathize with him because like the show has done a good job of like explaining who he is as a character and why he feels the way he does. Whereas the movie version is just like, man, depressed people, am I right? Like they're sad and they're inactive, and it's just like
that's a tough.
I don't know. It doesn't earn the lows.
It's a tough line to draw because I do think, like we said, I do think what Shinji's actions could have been believable with the proper ramp up, but they didn't have that. Whereas now it just feels like
shock value.
You know, yeah, I don't know, shock value or just it made the, even just the plot would have been completely different had Shinji just gotten in Unit 1 like right off the bat, right?
Yes, and like I think it's very easy again to like unfairly characterize that as, oh, you just want more action. But I think it's actually no, what I want more is like consistent characterization and like, you know, I don't know, like the Shinji of episode 22
Right,
would
but
have
he
gotten in
did.
the
When
robot.
he saw the severed head of Unit 2 and Kaji gave him the speech, he got in the robot and he fought
Yeah.
the Ribbon Arms guy, and yeah.
Yeah, and like that's the thing is like he actively like I mean again he doesn't like piloting the robot, but he piloted the robot to save Asuka and like the others around him. Whereas like again, it just feels like the Shinji of the movie is like
Yeah,
exaggerated to the point of like
maybe like a real person could have
caricature.
that kind of swing, but like I feel like when you're trying to tell a fictional story with a theme that you're building up to, like you don't want to undermine the theme, I guess, right? So like I don't know. There's a lot of I
Yeah.
mean, we've probably kind of beaten that point to death. I think we've got that. I think we're all kind of in agreement on there to varying degrees. So it is interesting because I remember. I don't know if I ever really loved End of Evangelion just because it's the type of tone and mood where I don't know if you could like be like, yeah, that was so much fun or whatever. But
oh yeah, no,
I was still pretty high on it as like
a
work of art or something. And then watching it again, I still think it has like value to it, but like I can see the holes in it a little more this time around. Maybe I'm used to being more like critical on watching anime these days after years of blogging or whatever, but it's interesting experience coming back to it. So all right, well, I think that is going to do it for our End of Evangelion talk. We have completed the entire series.
Finally.
So
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We're going to pull that joke out again, and we're going to take a break that is totally not several days and just a minute here, and we'll be back to after we've collected our thoughts, and we'll give our closing statements on the series and air all of our final grievances, say whatever else we need to say about the series, and wrap this thing up. So see everybody in a minute. And we are back. We have finished up the TV show. We've finished up End of Evangelion, and it is time for our final thoughts. Time to empty the clip, get off whatever takes we have left. Leave it all on the field, whatever cliche metaphor you want to use.
The end of EvanGLORIO.
Yes, we have reached the end of EvanGLORIO. So yeah, we're going to get into that. And before we get to some of the deeper stuff, I did mention last episode, I wanted to ask you, G, how much did you know and how much maybe did you not know is a more interesting question.
Sure.
Coming into Evangelion, were there any like shocking spoilers or things you weren't expecting that happened?
I'd say there still were, yeah. I mean, everybody listening knows that like I am the person here who is watching Evangelion for the first time here, and as a mecha fan, like you absorb a lot of things through cultural osmosis. There are just scenes and moments and things that are just iconic to the genre. This isn't just for Evangelion. This goes, kind of across the board because of kind of the mecha as a genre could sometimes be accused of being somewhat insular compared to the rest of anime. Like it kind of operates on its own logic and sensibilities, and because of that sort of narrower focus as a genre, mecha fans tend to be familiar with the canon of the genre, regardless of your, experience or expertise.
Right.
The last
I mean,
shooting from. Sorry, go
how
ahead, Joe.
many? I was going to say, like, how many anime have referenced Evangelion since 1995? Like,
Oh, totally.
there's no way you can watch anime and not at least pick up some of it,
Exactly,
right?
definitely. And that kind of goes, like I said, across the genre. Like watching the original Mobile Suit Gundam was eye-opening for me because it made me realize like how many shows were informed by its sensibilities. Same thing with like, even though I have never watched any of the Brave series, they have they have left an indelible mark upon the genre in their own unique ways. Whether you see these in parodies or tributes, you become familiar with poses and scenes and moments, and that goes for Ava as well. And so before I had watched the show, like I agree, saying what I already knew is not that interesting because like what I knew about Evangelion beforehand was a lot of like stuff kind of out of context. Like watching the fight scenes from End of Evangelion out of context.
Right.
Like just like seeing famous moments. I will say I did watch the first Rebuild movie years ago.
Right.
So like I was at least familiar with like the first third of
like the first Rebuild movie is pretty much a shot for shot of some of the early episodes.
Yes, and so I think you're right. It is more interesting to kind of get into what I did not know, what truly did surprise me about Evangelion. So I think on a kind of structural level, I think I mentioned this before. A lot of the middle of Evangelion, I was not actually that familiar with, and I think we got into this conversation, right? Like a lot of the stuff that like fans don't talk about 20 years later, like basically everything after Operation Yashima until like I don't know, probably until like the Sea of Darak, like. That stuff I was not like super familiar with. I was aware of the dancing episode. I was aware of like, the aircraft carrier scene. I was aware of like these bits and pieces, but like a lot of those moments I was not actually familiar with. Like which again, ironic because like it is it is that middle part of Evangelion that actually like sells the show for me and like is why like I cannot like bring myself to write off Evangelion entirely is because of like much of the goodwill that it established in those earlier parts.
That's kind of when it's peak mecha anime, right? Like at that
stage.
Yes.
it kind of at its most mecha anime, but I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes into just like how well done it is, how well executed it is. Just like
it's a lot of good episodes in there.
Yeah. In terms of other stuff I was not familiar with, the specifics of Toji, another character that, again, I think is quite relevant, but strangely not spoken of much in the fan base and not spoken of much in the discourse. But I was not really familiar. Like I was aware that Toji eventually becomes an Eva pilot, sort of, for an episode or two, but like I was not aware of like what eventually happens to him or like the specifics. I was not even aware. Like the fight between Unit 3 and Unit 1 is actually like one of the only fight scenes in Evangelion I was not on some level familiar with already. So like
okay, so you didn't even know any fight or anything at any point, right?
I was not even aware of the fight. Yes, yeah. Okay. So that part in that entire arc with Toji, I was not familiar with, and that's why I
pretty fresh. Yep.
Yeah, which I think is interesting because again, I actually think that arc with Toji is very strong. I think it's really well done, and again, I think it's a little weird, and maybe it's just something about the fan base that like they kind of glossed over that.
That's the things that they talk about, right?
Yeah. And I think finally the really big thing that I was not super familiar with is kind of the foundations of Asuka's character, her backstory, her origins.
Oh, okay, that's a
kind of what drives her to become who she. Okay, I'll put it this way: I was familiar with the basic like 2-sentence description of Asuka. That is, she's very, she is hot-blooded. She is very strong-spirited. But that she also harbors some deep-seated insecurities. But I was not familiar with what those insecurities were or where they originated from.
Right.
And so, like, look, again, well, not spoilers at this point, but because I watched the fight scene from End of Evangelion, I knew that Asuka did not really quote unquote survive the show in like some in any meaningful way.
She gets a raw deal. Yeah.
She gets a raw deal. Yes, I was familiar with that, but I was not familiar with like the emotional lows she sinks to in the TV show. I was not like I'd seen plenty of gifs of the throwing of the Lance of Longinus into the Angel, and but I was not familiar with what that Angel had done specifically. I was not familiar with what it had done to Asuka specifically.
Right.
And so like I think that I don't want to say that these moments were the strongest just because I wasn't familiar with them, but like they were definitely striking because I was not like I guess not prepared is not the right word, but like
you weren't familiar with them though. Right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like again, like I kind of knew on some intrinsic level that Asuka harbored like some very deep-seated insecurities, but I did not know the specifics. So kind of seeing those play out were more interesting moments for me.
Yeah, it's interesting with Asuka. I feel like you could kind of fill in the blanks like on a bullet point list of her like tragic backstory or whatever, but the execution of it maybe is, it's done pretty well.
I think it's something that you actually have to see for yourself. I think
like
right.
I guess it's
like somebody can tell you that Asuka like
right
is very insecure, but like you don't really understand it until you watch it. So like. It is in those aspects that, I am broadly overall like glad I watched the series,
Right. Okay. Yeah, there's a couple of good ones in there. So I mean, that's cool. You got to at least take some fresh stuff out of it.
Totally.
I just assumed like all like the actual plot, like instrumentality and all that stuff. Everybody knows that. Like you can't not know that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But,
look, I mean,
Gendo is evil.
Right.
Whatever other, it's like all the things that you see people making jokes about in every, half of all anime ever made since 1995.
Right. Totally.
I was amused one of the earlier podcasts when you said you thought the Lance of Longinus might have been a mid-season upgrade.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. All right. I did say that.
That was hilarious.
Episode, yeah.
Yes, I was generally caught off guard by that because like there is an infamous piece, not infamous. There's a famous piece by Yoshinari of the Eva units, and I believe one of them is holding the Lance of Longinus. So it was like, oh, that's a cool drawing, and like Yoshinari worked on Evangelion, so I assume that you put that lance to good use eventually.
Fighting off angels with that lance. And,
yeah, that's a cool looking lance. When I saw embedded in Lilith, I was like, oh shit. I should pull that out and get to work, huh? I guess actually related to that, the other thing that maybe I did not quite expect was, again, I think I need to make it clear, I do not particularly like Shinji as a character, especially after End of Evangelion, but I do think that the TV version of him, does put in a good, argument for why he is the way he is. His depression is not just a plot device to,
be sad for the sake of being sad.
Right, he's not sad for the sake of sad. Maybe he is in End of Evangelion. I think he might be sad for the sake of being sad in End of Evangelion, but in the TV series itself, I think, his personality is, well established, and so even if I don't like it personally, I do understand and respect the intent of the character in the show.
Right.
And what he serves in the narrative.
Right. Okay. Well, that's all good stuff. But I guess that's going to kind of set us up for, the bigger discussion of, now that we have finished all of the series, including the movie, what are our final overall thoughts? And I think this has kind of been the interesting question this whole podcast series, because we're all kind of coming at it from slightly different perspectives. I mean, G, especially because this is your first time watching it.
Right.
But, I watched it way back when, and, Ira watched it somewhere in between, and, our experiences have all varied a bit. But yeah, let's talk about, now that we've seen it all, what are just kind of our overall final impressions of the whole package. And again, G, if you want to go first, because you're the brand new one here.
I was willing to let you guys go first, because I have, look, as the person who's watched this for the first time, again, I will not act like my takes are new or fresh, on this show, but I have a lot of thoughts about this show, and so I figured instead of just letting me talk again for another 15 minutes, I figure because I am curious. I am curious for you guys as well. Actually, having watched this show before, and this show having served as something of a guiding post in your familiarity with mecha as a genre, I am actually curious about kind of what do you guys take from this show now, having watched it again in 2019?
Yeah, so Ira, I don't know if you want to go first then.
Just is it boring of me to say that it was basically how I remembered it?
I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's
legitimate. Yep.
I don't know.
I mean, is there anything new that you've taken away from it, or anything new that you appreciate that maybe or appreciate more, or
probably
anything that you appreciate less?
Show doesn't treat women super great as a whole, but also,
but
I might as well just say
the 5 women. He thanked the 5 women in the intermission.
I might as well just say Neon Genesis Evangelion is an anime made in 1995, and have it mean the same thing.
Oh, you're just going for the objective review here. I see. just stating the facts.
Well, I'm saying that means the same thing as it doesn't treat women very well.
Okay.
As a mentally ill person, I think its depiction of Shinji in particular is one of the most accurate of a depressed person that I've seen in almost anything, I would say. That kind of stands out to me, particularly on rewatch.
Would you say more so on rewatch that something you maybe understand better now, or
right, being able to see specific signs and stuff that now I'm more aware of as an adult.
Sure,
makes me go oh yeah, that's very true to experience.
I guess that makes sense.
I've seen other stuff where, according to the non-depressed creators, this character's supposed to be depressed, and I'll look at that and go, you clearly don't get it. Whereas,
for better or worse, right? Anno comes from a place of authenticity on this, right? So maybe that kind of brings that to it.
Mm-hmm. And then just seeing how well paced and plotted everything is really interesting to see. Now that I'm more familiar with how anime is produced and such, how we've talked in the past about how it's easy to look at Evangelion as everything was plotted down to the minute from the very beginning. But having watched anime for a long time now and realizing how down to the wire a lot of that stuff is,
how much of the last few episodes of that show turned into a very desperate improv routine,
right? But the ability of the show to be as well put together as it is,
given the circumstances, it's impressive in its own way, or at least fascinating, right?
In a way that I couldn't have articulated in the past, just because I wasn't familiar with how these things were made,
Are you with me on my opinion dropping of 25-26 a lot harder on this rewatch?
I still kind of like episode 26 because I think it's more interesting. 25, I think I said I didn't remember it at all. Which means it was not good. But the back half of 26 is still I think it's good. They made it work.
Yeah. And then, what about End of Evangelion? Because I was saying, my opinion dropped on that a little bit.
Tonally, I think I would agree with that. Because End of Evangelion is something where I remembered the literal plot beats of what occurs, but totally forgot all of the tone of it. Which pretty much means if I forgot about something, it means I probably didn't like it. So,
right.
So there you go.
It's interesting because I watch these so close to each other. I initially came away from 25 and 26 not that hot on them. I'm still not hot on them, but it really says something about End of Evangelion that it made me look back at 26 and be like, that wasn't so bad, I guess. I mean, there was a total consistency to it, and it wasn't as like fucking spiteful and mean-spirited as the movie. So,
right,
like it's interesting. I do want to. I'm gonna finally call out the fan base here real quick, and this will be the first of many times I call out the Evangelion fan base. But all you people out there that are like, oh, fucking don't worry about 25 and 26. End of Evangelion fixes the show. Like, you're full of shit. Like,
the people saying that are the same people who are like calling out quote unquote plot holes in media or whatever, right? Like
the cinema sins type.
Yeah, like like from a purely what literally happens standpoint, End of Evangelion is obviously more comprehensive in that events happen that lead to an ending rather than a total piece. But
I mean, don't get it wrong. I generally prefer my fiction to be more literal and comprehensive.
I would agree.
Comprehensible, But there's a reason why I don't really like Ikuhara's stuff. It's because it is so like surreal and metaphorical. But like, when it comes to this specific comparison, like the idea that someone, but that's the thing, I see that take a lot, that like, hey, like, don't worry, End of Evangelion answers everything. And it's like, no, I think it actually makes this whole story worse in some regards. But I just had to get that out there. Had to fucking put that on the record. So,
but yeah, it's kind of interesting going back because I wouldn't say Evangelion was ever a formative show for me or a formative mech show. Like, it was the show I went back and watched because everyone told me it was formative after I'd seen other shows.
Right. Yeah.
And, I think, in some ways I think that's maybe if, if I became dictator of the world, maybe that's how I would enforce watching Evangelion, is that you're not allowed to watch Evangelion if it's your first mecha anime, Because, like, I think that is, in many ways, I don't know. May I begin?
Is it time, G?
I think it is time.
You're warmed up. You're ready to go.
Yes.
Right.
I think in many ways, if I'm gonna like start formally getting to my thesis on Evangelion here, I think that in some ways Evangelion suffers from like both like the cultural context of how it came here to America. Like, I'm not going to deny that it is also hugely influential in Japan as well. But I think that the way it became influential actually kind of like vastly differs because of the context of how it was released. Like, I think that for better or worse, I think maybe you guys can point out some arguments against this, but I think that in general, I think that the West, and I think Western media criticism and discourse tends to have kind of this like overall obsession with the concept of originality. Like, oh, this thing that I like a lot must be great because it is unique, right? Like, it must be great.
Highly value novelty, whether or not it's actually there.
Whether that novelty is actually there. Yeah, perceived novelty is a good way to put it. Whether that novelty has actually been earned, there's often like an obsession in the West with like, oh, this game does things no other game does. Oh, this anime does something no other anime does, right? This book does something no other book does. And I think this is very different from like Japanese media, where I think that like the more interviews you read from the famous creators, in anime and even Japanese video games, like Tomino, like Ano, like, guys like Amaishi, you realize that actually, I mean, again, and I think that like a cruel or cynical person could call this like, oh, being proud of like being derivative. But I think that in Japan, you tend to get a little bit more of creators like being willing to admit like, no, actually, like I did this thing because like it was deeply inspirational to me, like this was a very like this informed a lot of my sensibilities when I grew up, and that's why they're here in this work. And so I think that like a lot of my issues, I think, in the grand scheme of like my issues with like Evangelion, or not even Evangelion itself, but like
the discourse,
the culture, the discourse around Evangelion, especially in the West, is this like misperception of like its uniqueness, and. I think finally having watched this show, I think I can confidently say that Evangelion is indeed a mecha anime. and that not only is it a mecha anime, it is one that is deeply informed by the various influences that were taken by its director Hideki Anno and the rest of the crew at Gainax. And I think you guys can agree with me here. I think these inspirations and themes, similar to like the oft-praised SSSS Grid band that aired last year, like that also in many ways, was deeply inspired by Evangelion itself. Like these tropes that it evokes and makes tribute to, and in some ways does genuinely deconstruct, it could not be done insincerely. It could not be done like unless the people involved were not like deeply like intimate with the
right
with that cultural heritage.
I think on this panel that was never ever in doubt.
I know. It's just I got to get these things out on the record so that everybody else knows how I stand on this shit. And I think that for better or worse, I think that like the West doesn't get a lot of that Japanese context, right? Like, I actually did some research. I actually fucking hit the books, so to speak, to kind of find some interviews with Anno, kind of talking about like his influences, right? Like, and so like you have the very obvious ones, right? Like Mazinger Z, Space Runaway Ideon, Devilman, Ultraman, of course. You see very like many very sincere like tributes to those Toku sensibilities. Devilman, Ideon, Mazinger. There's the the oft cited like Go Nagai-esque sensibility of like great power is not inherently morally tinged one way or another.
Or you become a god or a devil.
God or devil, right? Like, what will you do with the power that is given to you? And I think that theme is very like very apparent in Evangelion. And I have this quote specifically from Anno that kind of maybe gets into the core of like, this is a man who clearly knows what he's talking about, and those are the aspects of what I respect about Evangelion. So he says, actually, with Evangelion, I only thought of renewing the genre. At its core, mecha is still Mazinger Z. I thought to myself how Mazinger Z would be if it was created today. In the subgenre of giant robots, there is a type of image that stays in your mind. The robot which appears behind a mountain. It is at this moment that I said to myself, damn, whatever I do, I cannot escape Go Nagai. And I think that quote really does like do a great job of kind of getting into like Anno's like very apparent influences, and like I think the reason why Evangelion is like a unique and valid show that I think is like really like influential and important is that it's how do I put this?
It's capturing mecha anime at its time. Is that what we're
with it? Yeah, I think that is what it is. Like it is capturing I think the reason why it's important in Japan is because it captured like that zeitgeist at the time, and like what really elevates Evangelion above like so many other shows is it took that cultural heritage, that very real heritage, that very real legacy of mecha anime, and it elevates it further because of how Gainax was able to leverage that understanding. And I think that because in the West, we didn't have Mazinger, we didn't get Getter Robo, we didn't get Gundam, we didn't get a lot of these shows until much later, and even now in 2019, I feel that many, because mecha is such an old genre, like, we don't see a lot of that stuff in, like, the Western, like, cultural zeitgeist, and I think that, because of that, the Western discourse has, like, has like a very like myopic understanding of like why the show actually matters versus why I think a lot of people think the show matters.
It's a very different context.
Yeah, and I think that is that's the reason why I think that is very much why I very much push back against like the oft like I think everybody here has probably read one of those like mainstream like anime articles, especially in the wake of the Netflix airing of the 10 important anime to watch after Evangelion, and like no mecha anime are listed, or like what are like 5 cool robot shows to watch after Evangelion, and it lists like fucking like Code Geass and Gurren Lagann, and it's like
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I think it's just like I think that's what's always bothered me. It is like there's this weird like
the unspoken premise that mecha began with Evangelion.
Yes, this idea that like Evangelion, like either that mecha anime began with Evangelion, or that maybe even worse, actually, maybe the take I actually maybe despise even more is that mecha ended with Evangelion. That like, oh, Evangelion is the book end of the mecha genre. Like, don't worry, everybody. Like, Evangelion finished writing the book on giant robots. Like, I think that, like, to go back to that Anno quote, he was trying to renew the genre. He was trying to have a conversation with it, and like. Do I genuinely think that like mecha anime has continued to kind of fail and struggle to like converse with Evangelion? I totally agree. I mean, one only has to look at stuff like Razafon or Darling in the Franxx to see like how poorly mecha as a genre has conversed with Evangelion. But like,
I don't think in Japan exists the like cultural thought that Evangelion is like the one. You know.
Yeah. It's totally.
It's like a deeply influential and extremely good popular series, but it's not the one.
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it, Eero. Thank you. Like Evangelion is important, undeniably important. I could never ever like take that away from it. But like, I think that in Japan, yes, like Evangelion is like, Unit 01 would appear on the Mount Rushmore of mecha anime, but like, it would not be. But like, you would not make the fucking Lincoln Memorial of mecha anime with Unit 01 sitting on the chair, like it's not like, I think within the context of Japanese mecha, it is hugely important, but like not, it is not the end all be all, which is I think the problems that, I have with like, many of the Western fans of like Eva specifically, maybe not of mecha anime itself, is like this idea that, oh, once you've watched Evangelion, like don't worry, that's the only required reading for mecha anime, right? Like this idea like, oh, like, no other mecha anime matters because once you've watched Evangelion, like the debate has been settled or something. Right. And I think that has always deeply frustrated me with like a lot of the, again, I don't want to say casual or mainstream, but like just I think the people who have watched Evangelion because they are told to watch Evangelion, but then have not followed up on any of the other like very important like cultural influences that led to the things that actually make it special.
So, I want to follow up on that mostly to just give you an opportunity to, I guess, answer this question. But, is it fair to expect people to have the context? Is always the question I ask on that kind of thing. Like,
it is. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I guess you could say if they're going to open their mouths and talk about Evangelion in the context of mecha anime, then I guess, yes, they should be doing their homework. But, and I mean, is that specifically what you're talking about here? Is it?
I think so, yes, because here's the thing. I don't mean to gatekeep, like, I'll be honest. If you watched Evangelion and you loved it and you bounced off literally every other mecha anime in existence, like, like, you do you, that's your taste, like, that's fine, that's fine, because in many ways Evangelion is unique, like, it is not unique in many ways, but it is undeniably unique, and if it's the one for you, like, go with God, I think where I often, like, get frustrated is, like, I don't know. It is that
unlike other mecha anime.
Yes, I think it's when people attempt to speak from a position of expertise that they have like very much not like earned.
Right.
That I think that frustrates me. I think that like often you see far too much like writing and discourse out there that like I think gets into that in a way that like. It does, it does frustrate me. I think that like if you're going to speak from a position of authority, I think you should do your research. I think that, like, again, I'm not going to say fucking if you haven't watched the original Mobile Suit Gundam, you're not allowed to talk about mecha anime. But it's more like if you want to have that conversation, though, if you want to have the conversation about like what Eva means to the genre and anime as a whole, like. I think you do need to be more familiar. I think
it's fair to criticize people about context if they're going to bring up context.
yeah, I think so. I think that, like, and I just think there's a dearth of like, again, people could write whatever they felt. We live in the era of the internet, motherfucker. Anybody could just put whatever they want on the internet, and like the rest of us just have to live with it.
Right.
But like, I just think that like if you want to be a part of that conversation, I do think that, like, you know, even if you don't watch the original Mobile Suit Gundam, like, you have to at least be familiar with, like, the themes it deals in, because, like, you know, just to use, like, that oft-cited example, like Shinji being afraid of getting in the robot, like, that's a trope that's literally decades in the making in the mecha genre, and, like, that's a thing you should be familiar with if you want to talk about, like, you know, Eva or mecha as a whole.
Right. Okay. I mean, is that you know, basically getting into your opening thesis on Evangelion being a mecha anime?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is why, like, you know, it sounds very, like, silly for me, like, oh, my thesis is that Evangelion is a mecha anime, because I think that, like, obviously, I think most people would not deny that, but I want to reclaim it, because, like, I think too much of the discourse, because of, I think, that Western obsession with, like, novelty, there's a desire to claim Evangelion for, like, I don't know, what is the opposite of mecha? Like, what is outside of mecha anime? Like claim Evangelion as, like, a piece of, like, to take it away from mecha anime. That, oh, it stands above that genre, you know?
Right.
Like, oh, it's better than the rest of the genre. Whereas, you know, like, I think the reason I created that thesis is because I think that it is very much a part of that genre, and it is a very important chapter. You know, I think that the conversation Ava has was both A, inevitable, and B, needed to happen eventually. Like, the path that Tomino took mecha anime down with Gundam was a path that was eventually going to lead to Evangelion. That conversation eventually needed to happen. Like, and so because of that, I do think that Evangelion is, like, very valuable to the genre in that regard.
Do you want to elaborate on that, as far as, like, are you talking about Gundam introducing more, like, practical themes, you know, more realistic type of themes, as opposed to just, you know,
big superheroes,
giant superhero robots?
Yeah, because, you know, I don't mean to get into the entire history of mecha here, but, like, prior to, you know, Gundam, the original 1979 Mobile Suit Gundam, you know, this is not a fair generalization, but it is a generalization that, like, giant robots in general tended to be kind of just giant metallic superheroes, you know, like, you know, your giant Robo and your Tetsujins. And then Go Nagai evolves the genre, you know, and he takes it and that's why I say Mazinger is also important to the, like, formation of Eva, because it's very easy, I think, to lump in Mazinger Z with the rest of, like, early mecha anime, but actually Mazinger Z in and of itself was actually kind of a paradigm shift for its own time.
It's the first piloted one, wasn't it?
And I don't believe it was actually the first piloted mecha, but it was one of the first mecha anime to actually get into sort of the more, again, this is, like, very slight, and it was done by Go Nagai, so in only the way fucking Uncle Go could do, which is aka as edgy and violent as possible in some ways, but, like, Mazinger Z began to introduce this idea of, like, the mech as a monster, right? Like, the mech as kind of a natural phenomenon, man-made, but, like, a phenomenon that cannot be controlled. And, like, the idea of, like, what does one do with this sort of unlimited power? Do they do good or ill with it?
Right.
And then Gundam, however, is the one that kind of begins to introduce the idea of, like, the mech not as a superhero, but as a machine, a war machine, you know, in the context of a war, you know, not a weekly fight against, right, you know, monsters or evil scientists.
It's a tank or a plane, right? It's
right, a conflict between real humans with real human ideologies and, like, grievances with each other. And
then Ideon is
Ideon is Tomio be like, actually, what if none of this matters?
I mean, you know, he's basically like an interdimensional monster at that point, in the shape of a truck.
I must admit, I have not watched Ideon. I've done some more reading up on it since we've watched Ava to better speak to it. But Ideon is basically Tomio arriving at the conclusion that, like, actually, what if mankind can't save itself? Actually, what if mankind doesn't deserve to save itself? Like, and, you know, does that sound familiar to another mecha anime, perhaps? And so, like, I think all of these, like, tropes and all these themes were eventually building to the conversation that Evangelion was eventually going to have. You know, I cringe whenever I hear, like, the whole, like, X show deconstructs the entire genre, you know, whether that is Evangelion or Madoka or whatever you have. But, like, I think that in some ways that deconstruction, you know, did have to happen eventually. Eventually, someone like Anno and Gainax had to come along and look at Gundam, look at Mazinger, look at Ideon, and be like, not what is the logical conclusion of all this, but like, what are many of these things taking to like their harshest, most grounded, most cynical conclusion? And that is eventually what Evangelion becomes. And unfortunately, like, here's the thing, just earlier in this podcast, I was railing against the idea of Evangelion being the bookend of the mecha genre. But I will admit, like, and this is a thing that I hold against mecha as a whole, rather than the fans, is that, like, I think that in many ways, the mecha genre, the people who are a part of it, have in some ways failed to like take that conversation forward. Like, I think it's telling that, like, if I'm going to be very honest, I think that the only two mecha anime that like have really ever had a meaningful conversation with Evangelion and its themes are Daiguard, which I mentioned earlier in this series of podcasts, and Gurren Lagann. I feel like those are maybe the two mecha anime that like have actual meaningful conversations with Evangelion and its themes. Because in many ways, again, I'm not one of those guys like, oh, Gurren Lagann is the anti-Eva, but like, having watched Evangelion, I actually can come to a better appreciation for Gurren Lagann's themes, as like goofy and bombastic as they are, because like perhaps both Gurren Lagann and Eva arrive at the base conclusion. Actually, what if humanity isn't worth saving, right? Like, what if what if humanity does not deserve to be saved? If it does not deserve this power, what next? And I think that both shows come to equally valid but very different conclusions. I mean, maybe one of them is a lot goofier than the other in execution, but I think that is like a completely valid conversation to have. I think that where a lot of mecha anime fucks up is that a conversation is a two-way street. The reason why I list Daiguard and Gurren Lagann, despite their like huge tonal differences with Evangelion, is I think those are shows that are conversing with Evangelion. They're like saying, hey, this is what you said, and this is what I'm going to say in return. Whereas I think too many shows are more like Darling in the Franxx, where they're just like, let me just parrot what you literally just said, but I'll do it worse, like by every possible metric.
So let me just redirect a bit back to like Evangelion itself here and your experience watching G. Would you say Evangelion is good? I mean, did you enjoy it in any capacity, or?
I mean, I would potentially posit that whether something is good and whether or not is enjoy it are two different things.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
That's a question that is actually maybe the one I wrangle with the most in my feelings about this show. I want to say that I genuinely enjoyed the experience of watching Evangelion. However, I think that Evangelion as a show, as a story, as a vehicle for delivering the thematic like intent of Anno and Gainax, I think that it is so intrinsically compromised in so many ways that while I recognize its influence, while I recognize its impact, I personally cannot say I love the show. I don't dislike it, but like, I think it is a good show, but I don't think I could ever call myself a fan of it.
When you say compromise, are you talking like the technical aspects, or what are you talking about?
Kind of everything, to be honest. Like the technical aspects, the directions it eventually takes. I think a lot of this is unfortunately laid at the feet of End of Evangelion.
Sure.
That unfortunately is not even the final word on Evangelion, no less than mecha genre. Because Anno has decided he's going to keep making more.
Sure.
And so
I didn't want to go there, but yeah.
No, we're not. I'm not. We already kind of got into that a little bit in the first part, so I'm not going to get into it here. But just like, what is Anno trying to say about Evangelion? What does he want to say about the show? Because I no longer understand. Because
one could say that the ways that in which any piece of media is compromised by its production or will make it interesting.
Yes, like I said, interesting show, impactful show, influential show. Again, like if I were to comprise like the mecha anime Mount Rushmore, or like the top 10 list of like the most influential mecha anime of all time, of course Evangelion is on that short list. It's probably in that top 5, maybe even top 3. But like if I were to create a list of the best mecha anime of all time, Evangelion probably doesn't even make my top 10. Like maybe top 20, maybe. Like I because I think it is compromised, like not just technically, but I think morally in a lot of ways. I don't mean to be like some like fucking I don't know, like moral crusader, but like there are just so many things about Evangelion that are like so like I don't admit some of this is just my taste and my sensibilities, but it's like so cynical and so mean spirited. And again, maybe some of this is just End of Evangelion's fault, but like it makes it hard for me to like again like it makes it hard for me to be a fan of the show. Like in the way that like one describes themselves as a fan of something, like not that you can't be a fan of something you don't like. I mean, I am a fan of mecha and everything that comes with that, but like I don't know if I could ever call myself a fan of Evangelion because, like, there are things I love about it. There are some things about that it does magnificently. Like, there are things that Evangelion does that I truly am forced to admit it does better than any other mecha anime I have ever seen. But there are also so many pitfalls it stumbles into. There are so many ways in which it trips and struggles, and like no matter what the intent of its creator, the actual execution of that intent and message are so like murky and like just like I don't know, just like shaky that like I guess I cannot come away from it saying that like I wholeheartedly liked the show.
It is not a perfect show for sure. It is
right, and I don't mean to say it should be a perfect show or that I would like it if it was.
a lot of people
show. Like
feel that way, or seem to think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely has its flaws for sure.
Yeah, and I think for me it's just like as somebody who likes things that are flawed, or I have liked things that are flawed in the past. I think that Evangelion is, despite the many great things it does, I think it is too flawed, in just too many important ways.
It's wild to me that you would say that people think it's not flawed. Like,
I think there are people out there who like are like I mean again, how many people out there truly fucking get out there and say like this show is perfect from start to finish? That this show like is the final word on mecha anime.
I mean,
like, I can only assume that those people who are saying that hold the opinion that like the show is, if not flawless, then entirely perfect in its like execution of its intent.
I mean, I know this was a long time ago, but the reason I first watched it is because everybody in the proto-internet back then was saying this is the greatest anime of all time. I was like, I guess I better watch that because everyone's saying it's the great. And I feel like that talk has died down a little bit over the years, but there's still people who have that in the conversation.
I think it's still out there. I think it is out there, and I mean, maybe you have to be a masochist like me and you have to expose yourself to it, but enough of it is out there, and enough of it is out there on mainstream that opinion and that discourse is out there enough on mainstream outlets, or mainstream as far as anime can get anyways, that
Okay.
If it is a minority, it is still a vocal one.
Yeah, I don't think that has died out or will ever die out, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit later here in the conversation. But yeah, I mean, I guess if I can switch gears a little bit and offer some of my perspective on rewatching, I guess with me, like when you hear me talking about stuff that I like, I always talk a lot about how does it make me feel. I talk a lot about feelings and not so much about details, because generally I tend to not really care much about the details. It's just did you get me there in the end? And I think that's why I have a much higher tolerance for like abstract and weird stuff and whatever. It's like what matters to me is like, and hopefully this doesn't make me sound too pretentious, but like,
but like the asterisk there is that's hard to talk about such things without sounding pretentious.
Yeah, right. Like I'm not gonna like act like people are not gonna listen to me and be like, man, what a fucking pretentious dickhead that guy is.
I'm just saying for me that like when I like the type of art I enjoy is like when the artist can like successfully make me feel a certain way that or make me share the way they're feeling, right? Like. I like there are many ways you can accomplish doing that, and I tend to not really care how. Just did you find a way to do it? And I guess with Evangelion, I've always personally felt like it accomplishes that well, but maybe prior to rewatching this, I was thinking of it more in like general terms, like everybody can feel the sense of, you know, hopelessness and frustration and, you know, whatever sad emotion you want to stick in there. Even you know, the aspects of Anno's depression are pretty clear to pick up. But I was thinking about, like, as I was rewatching, and this will probably dovetail a little bit into your points, G. Like, kind of narrowing down more specifically the feeling it was giving me, as it feels like when you're struggling to enjoy something that you love, if that makes sense. So, like, I feel like when you watch it, you can tell. I feel like it's very clear that Anno loves anime. He loves giant robots. He loves kaiju. He loves you know, military documentaries, whatever. There's a lot of things that I feel like you can see his reverence for in the material, and yet he can't just like do those things at face value and enjoy it. If that makes sense. And, you know, part of that is, you know, whether it's stemming from his depression or, you know, whatever he was feeling at the time, you know, he ends up expressing, you know, this sort of, you know, self-loathing, if you will, out of all of that. And I just found it interesting. Like even I had mentioned when I was talking about that Ikuhara interview, how he brought up kind of that point I was thinking, because he mentioned, I'm paraphrasing here, something to the effect of, I wish I had it up with me, but it was something to the effect of, like, maybe the idea of just enjoying an anime seemed novel to Anno at the time. like he couldn't just like enjoy the things that he enjoys. You know, he was driven to make this. And I think what I also find just fascinating about the whole thing is, like, I do feel like, and we may never really know the answer to this, but I do feel like the making of Evangelion and the end result is a lot more organic than people think, and than even I originally thought. I have to wonder how much of it was just Anno being tasked with making a new anime, sitting down, and this is what, like, poured out of his soul, as opposed to him thinking, I am going to write an allegory for my struggles with depression. And I find that aspect of it interesting. But, like, either way, I still feel like it successfully gets the feeling across to you. And I think that's what, to me, is, like, I think was hammered home on this rewatch, but also just, like, why I feel like the show is, like, probably the thing that I appreciate the most about the show, and why I think it's, like, special. And you know, it does have a lot of I do appreciate the mecha anime aspects, and I think they're critical to getting that feeling across, because, like I said, that's part of, like, because I don't even think Evangelion is a deconstruction of mecha. I
would agree.
I think it, like I said, I think it holds a lot of reverence for the genre. Like, a deconstruction is, like, gonna, like, pick it apart and, like, you know, tear it to pieces and, you know, point stuff out that, you know, maybe nobody's thinking about. I don't think that's the case really with Evangelion. It's really a vehicle for, you know, highlighting this feeling that Anno is getting across to you. So, you know, all those things combined, I think, make it a very unique and special anime. And I felt I was glad that at least the TV show held up for me rewatching it. And and I mean, I'm saying I'm a little more down on Evangelion, but I still think I appreciate it to a certain degree. But the TV series, I'm glad it held up for me. It still had the same emotional impact for me watching it, and I just feel like I understand that even more so, or at least I have more perspective on it. I found that very interesting on the whole rewatch. So I guess if you want to get into the the feelings aspect of it, that was kind of my takeaway from watching again.
Yeah, and I think those feelings are valid. I think that at the end of the day, like there is no hard and fast rule on how one evaluates fiction, how one evaluates media. Like I'm not going to act like I hold every show I ever watch to the same standard I held Ava of like how did you execute on your like thematic intents and messages and blah blah blah. But like, and so I think that like I think you are correct, Jill. I think that in many ways, Evangelion does succeed in what it sets out to do, which is communicate the emotions and feelings of the creators who worked on it, and crafting and evoking that feeling in the show itself. Um, and I guess this kind of ties into like what I said I think a few podcasts ago, where like I could like academically appreciate everything this show was doing, but like there was no ability for me to like really feel anything in my heart for Evangelion,
Right.
like for its characters or its plot developments, like you know.
Yeah, I was thinking about that
eh,
too, because like I kind of agree in that like the individual characters compared to like you know pick a lot of my other favorite anime where the individual characters are the ones I'm very sympathetic and feel attached to. I don't necessarily feel that way in Evangelion. I guess in this case I almost feel like more sympathetic for Ano, or people who are going through what Ano was going through at the time. Like it's almost on that level where the emotional connection is, maybe. Whereas the
sure.
characters kind of feel more like I don't know, more
Ciphers.
yeah, kind of like metaphorical for particular feelings or whatever.
I mean, if that is the case, then that could very well be a reason why I guess I feel like I don't really have much of a connection to Evangelion, because like I don't know. I think I'll always just be the kind of person who holds the belief that like I think that it's good for works to be personal, and I think a work can be very personal. But like at the end of the day, like no matter how personal or introspective like a piece of work is, it still needs to be like a well crafted and entertaining piece of like media for me to like enjoy it. I guess like
I hesitate to look at any work as like with. I hesitate to look at any work as something to be looked as a window to view a person.
yeah,
Like that always strike. Obviously, there's some validity to that. We wouldn't consider any work to have meaning unless it was created by a person. But at some point, if you're trying to get a reading on the person through the work, I feel that's potentially misguided.
I think
As opposed to
yes.
viewing the work itself.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good take on it, Eero. I think that's kind of what I was. You did a better job of explaining basically what I was trying to try to suss out. There is just like I think on some level you have to make that separation between the artist and the work, and I think that much of Evangelion. I mean, maybe perhaps some of the issues with Evangelion is that the artist and the work are almost, or at least it gives off the impression that they are one and the same, and that is not as interesting to me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's not like it's entirely just this is I feel bad for Ano or whatever, but just like it's almost like I would compare it to a simpler version might be listening to a song, right? Like I feel like something in song, like if somebody's singing about their heart is broken because their girlfriend left them or something like that. Like I feel like that's a much like more direct, easier to uh, easier to illustrate example of like connecting with the person, sharing an experience with the person. So maybe it's not so much about like them specifically, but you're having that like shared experience.
Sure, yeah.
So I think that's more what I'm getting at than like this is a autobiographical story of Ano, and that's what interests me, I guess. But the fact that there's like this shared experience that we can all have, I mean, it's not just everybody watching the show has this shared experience where we all feel feel this, or at least the attempt is there for us to all feel this same thing, right? But I don't know, maybe that's getting a little abstract or whatever, but that's
I mean, you're the one who likes the Ikahara
yes,
shows, so
that's kind of, I mean, like I said, that's my perspective. I can understand people are not going to necessarily buy into all of that, but I like to talk a lot about feelings and whatnot, so that's kind of where I'm
sure, and I think that is an entirely valid way to enjoy and consume a work.
right. But I do like cool robots too. I think we were talking about this the other day, so like when I actually think about what my favorite anime are of all time, they almost all have robots in them. So
robots are very cool. People sleeping on robots. They've been sleeping on robots for like the last 10, 20 years, and
that is also important to the conversation for me. But
I mean, I think we've already said this many times, but I one last time for old time's sake, I am glad that Eva possesses its kind of multifaceted, cohesive identity. Like, I am truly grateful that Eva does develop in the way it does, because I think that cohesive like whole of what Evangelion is only exists because of like the way it tackles so many things with the same characters in the same world, and that gives it all like a much more like multi-dimensional quality to it.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, we can say that one more time. Like, you can't really take a piece out of Evangelion and it still be the same. Like, it needs all of its parts to be the show that it is, right? That's what we've been saying the whole time. But
yeah, it's always weird to me when people are like, the affectation that Ava's really about the characters and everything else is just a vehicle for that or whatever,
Yes,
which is something I have seen.
Yes, I've always railed against that sentiment. I think that like if there's like a fucking like if you want a fucking like good activation phrase for me to like just turn me into like whatever like a fucking just berserk killer or whatever, like the phrase is probably that like unlike other, I mean, not just that, but it's unlike other mecha anime, this one is about the characters. It's like motherfucker, please, every mecha anime is about the characters. It can also be about the mechs. Like
sometimes the mechs are characters.
And yes, sometimes,
as we'll find out in The King of Braves, EvanGLORIO.
You keep wanting to push that one, but I don't think you're gonna be able to pull it off, Hero. This is not. You do not have the fucking like endless willpower that I have to just keep saying Legend of the Glorio Heroes Gaiden that will eventually turn that into an inevitability.
You managed to work your one reference in for every podcast, but
Indeed,
all right, yeah. I mean, I guess that kind of touches into what the last thing I wanted to talk about is like the legacy question on the show. Like, I've always found it interesting that of all of many anime that have come out, I don't know if any anime has like really stuck around in the way that Evangelion has. Like, it got like super popular, maybe like outside of like the big shonen shows or something like that. But like
I was gonna say like Dragon Ball.
I mean, it got like super popular when it came out, and it's really never gone away. I guess maybe the one difference I would draw between like the big shonen shows or something like that is like there's hasn't really been any new content except maybe the movies eventually. But there was a 10-year gap in between those, and then they had however many year gaps in between movies or whatever.
Whereas they had another 10-year gap.
I mean, like, why has Evangelion stuck around? Are we still going to be talking about it the same way 20 years from now? Like, is it that permanently embedded in anime history at this point? I mean, go ahead, G.
So, my thinking is that I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. Some of it earned by the show itself, and some of it, I think, just if I'm being frank, just sheer happenstance.
Yep. Momentum.
Yes, more momentum is a good way to put it. So, of course, the biggest is that Evangelion really blew up. It was like one of the most like notable mecha anime of its time for a while, and a lot of this is because the genre was not falling out of style, but it was certainly beginning to kind of approach its twilight years in a way. Like there were still important mech anime being made. I mean, hell, even within the time span of Eva, you see stuff like Gaogai Gar and Turn A Gundam. Works that I think are hugely important to like the genre. But Evangelion, was the one that hit the big mainstream success, and I think some of that is I think quite frankly, and I think I think this is the thing. Like people always talk about like, oh, like the writing and the characters, and I admit I am a more visually minded person, but I think it's also just that Evangelion has some very iconic designs. I think people should not underestimate how important like a good flashy design is to like something that will.
You'll never mistake Unit 1 for another show.
Yeah, like I mean, there's a reason why in many ways, there's a reason why Gundam also continues to exist, and maybe not here in the States, but at least in Japan, rivals or eclipses Evangelion in its iconic status, because fucking everybody knows what a Gundam in Izaku looks like. Like a lot of that, everybody knows Char's robot is red / salmon pink, whatever. But these aspects are visually attractive and iconic. And I think that especially holds true for Evangelion, not just the units themselves, but the characters, let's not act like Evangelion is iconic for lofty reasons. It's also iconic because of Asuka and Rei. Let's not get it twisted here, right? Like, a lot of the merchandising around Evangelion is less about the robots and more about those two characters specifically.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. The Asuka and Rei figures, the Asuka and Rei backpacks and folders and bento boxes and toothbrushes and
if anybody's listening right now, somebody go on myfigurecollection.net and see if any anime characters have more figures created for them than Asuka or Rei. Either one of them.
Yeah, and but that's what it means. I don't mean that I'm not saying that aspect should take away from the show, but I think that I think Evangelion does have a very, I think it has a valuable and earned legacy. But I also think that for better or worse, I think some of it is just the very aggressive merchandising of the show, and a lot of that is because despite some of the real ratchet shit he said recently, Sadamoto is a very good character.
Oh, is he a cop now?
He's a very
we really not get into it.
We really cannot get into it now, but Sadamoto has said some shit that
let's put that
worse than
let's
a motto. I'll leave it at that. But he's a very good artist. He's a very good character designer. It's very easy to look back at Rei and Asuka now and be like, wait, really? These characters are unique? But they are iconic characters for a reason. They have solid, unique designs that contrast well with each other. You can tell that those characters were built from the ground up to be appealing, And I think a lot of the aspect of that is that. I mean, right? It's look, let's be real. Iro, Fate Stay Night's not famous because if it's good writing or interesting world building. Fate's famous because Saber is an iconic design.
It's true.
Rin is an iconic design.
There's a reason nobody cares about Tsukihime anymore.
Yeah, if people actually cared about the writing in Fate,
no Arcoid faces out there. It's all
right. There would be a lot more Tsukihime stands out there, but and that's what I mean, right? So much of it is, and that's not it isn't the same for Gundam as well, right? Char and Amuro and Gundam and the Zatsu might as well be characters themselves, right? Of course, but that's what I mean, right? I think in many ways that legacy is also a commercialized legacy, Gynax realized they had a cash cow on their hands, and while they didn't fucking milk the shit out of Evangelion itself, they did not make Evangelion 2, 3, and 4,
props
not yet, anyways. Well, I guess they did.
There are literally, isn't there literally a spin-off?
I believe there's a PS2 game that is literally called the Untitled Evangelion 2, which is very funny to me. That's very funny. I think it's very funny that exists. Apparently, I have not looked into it myself, but apparently the manual and in-game materials, written materials in that game, supposedly explain a lot of the
the classified information file.
Yeah, about how
actually all the lore.
we can't get into it now.
I'm gonna if you don't mind me interrupting, I'll
go ahead.
segue this into one of the other reasons I think Evangelion is iconic, particularly in the West, is the use, however misguided, of Christian imagery and such.
Yeah.
Just like
that.
I think to a lot of people, like I have literally had people tell me that, like, oh yeah, I watched Evangelion after church, as if like that's being incredibly subversive or something. Like, obviously, the opinion and the modern opinion has, I think, pretty much fully gone into all of that was bullshit. But
there was a lot
I think
to talk about
at the time, right? Like I grew up in a highly religious household. Lots of people I know grew up in highly religious households, and I think like having that type of imagery, talking about Adam and God and the tree of life and terminal dogma, etc., like to a young 90s Western group, like that lends it some credence that might not otherwise exist.
Totally. Like there's an air of like
I've seen religious people pick up the show because the title is Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh wow, that's interesting. And I think that's you're right, Euro. Like I think for better or worse, like it is imagery that resonates with an American audience because it invokes Western imagery that like you're either, if you're not like intimately familiar with, you are at least aware of. You know, like look, like, you know, fucking, I'm not one of those guys going to go full woke and say, oh man, America is actually a theocracy. But like, actually, you know, I mean, fuck, dude, we say, you know, we swear under God and all that shit. Like it is a part of our everyday lives.
It would be less compelling to us, like, even though, like, quote unquote, objectively in the show, they're all just aliens, like, calling them angels and such lends it weight to a Western audience particular, I think.
It lends it an air of like mystical, like almost like mystical physicality, actually, right? Like I'm sure there are people out there who like have actually taken the task to try and like interpret Evangelion as some kind of like religious text almost, right? Like I'm sure those takes, or maybe those takes were more prevalent in the 90s and early 2000s. Like they,
particularly for Western audiences, immediately puts the idea of asking like spiritual questions, right? Whether
yes,
you know, we've all eventually come to find out that's not what Evangelion is talking about. But when that's the first thing you see is angels and crosses and stuff like that, like, you know, our brains are hardwired to at least start thinking in that direction,
right? Like our cultural background.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And like again, I think it's like. And again, so it gets back to this idea of like, did Evangelion actually earn its legacy or not? Like, maybe not, but like the combination of like the things it consciously decided to do, I think, does lend to that. You know, it does lend it that quality. And I think like the last thing I would say, like the last reason I'd say that like Evangelion has like really remained in like the public consciousness, you know, is like, you know, again, I think that like. I might be a little bit biased here because I'm a mecha fan. And maybe that doesn't happen anymore. I think that this era has finally come to a close, but I kind of I tend to hold a view of anime history that anime history has basically been defined into the epochs that were defined by the important mecha anime that came out at the time. I think that like you could actually track like the history and development of anime as a medium to like the important mecha anime that were like out, right? Like starting with like Mazinger Z, and then Gundam, and then Evangelion. Like you could almost effectively divide. I mean, you can
even divide to like what has appealed to us, and that's what we look at, though. Like,
I mean, yes and no, because I think that like in some ways, like. I think that's the thing, right? Like, if we're talking about one thing about like mainstream reactions to like mecha anime, I think that like every few years you have, for some reason,
mecha anime, sure, but anime as a whole, I think that's a little muddier.
Hear me out on this, right? Like, I think that, like, when you talk about, like, the most, like, iconic or, like, you know, memorable anime of all time, I think even people who are not mecha fans will inevitably have some mecha on their list. Because, like, I think every few years, I don't know why this phenomenon exists, but I think every few years, despite the fact that mecha anime continues to air fucking almost at least a couple every year of, you know, highly varying quality, but for some reason, every few years, there is, like, the mecha anime that, like, draws like the mainstream attention,
Sure.
like to the level of like the biggest shonen out there, you know? Like of the last few years, you know, it was stuff like Gurren Lagann or Code Geass.
I guess the last few years of 13 years ago.
Oh boy, yes. Don't remind me how long
I
it's
think this
actually
era.
been.
I think this.
Fine.
I think that era has, if not ended, it's been fading out for a while.
People were talking about Darling in the Franxx last year.
I mean, yes, fine. I said those two because I didn't want to invoke Darling in the Franxx' name again, but fine, yes, like Darling in the Franxx, there are mecha anime that for some reason intrinsically draw like the wider attention of the viewing fan base. And like, but I think that like for better or worse, like again, like I think that none of them really quite had the staying power of a Gundam or an Evangelion. And I guess this is a question that like maybe ties even beyond Evangelion itself, but gets into like what makes something iconic, I guess, because like I refuse to believe it is actually just wholly the quality of the work itself.
There's a lot of factors.
Because,
like I think
as long as you can get people to continuously talk about it.
Right, and like how much of that is just the marketing? How much of that is just the commercialization of its most iconic elements?
I don't even know so much of the marketing. I think you were right earlier on. A lot of it is just kind of luck and being in the right place at the right time. Like it's got to be like what people want to see at the right time. But I think there has to be. I think a more relevant parallel in slightly more recent times would be Madoka. I know it's not a mecha anime, but like the concept of something that is good, but probably became bigger for a lot of other factors, right? Like,
sure, totally.
Being, and part of that is being, in the right place at the right time, and what people want to see. I think there has to be also, some kind of general appeal. Like it's got to be something that's going to appeal to a lot of people. Like I think Evangelion has aspects to it that are going to appeal to people that aren't normally drawn to mecha anime to begin with, or are not, experts in the field on it, right? Like, and you could say the same for Madoka.
Yeah,
it's gotta have a hook.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's a lot of things that I think you're right, because popular almost more often than not doesn't mean good, right? Like,
right, like that's why I think I'm more cynical on this. Of like, sure, that hook has to be there, but once it is marketing, will draw y'all in.
But then there's levels to it too, where there's the the hit of the week, there's the hit of the year, there's the hit of the decade, and then there's the the hit of the century. Like there's like okay, so that's coming back to my original question: are we going to still be talking about Evangelion 20 years from now, as opposed to like say, are we still be talking about Darling in the Franxx 20 years from now?
So my cynical take is the only reason we're going to be talking about Evangelion 20 years from now is because the rebuild movies will still be in recent memory. Like that's why they made them. Yeah, again, it's like this is. I mean, again, I'm not going to act like Gundam is iconic just because of the quality of the work. Gundam is iconic because also they keep putting out more Gundams, and so like fucking whether I like it or not, I have to keep watching Gundam, and I have to be like, man. That sure is a robot with a white, blue, red, and yellow color scheme.
Some fucking interview about Rebuild where they're like, it's been like 10 years, and now there are people who haven't seen Evangelion, so we better make more Evangelion.
And that's a thing, right? Like, I think that, like, in some ways, like, sure, Evangelion did not eventually get, Evangelion Wing and G Evangelion and, like, Evangelion 0080 war in the pocket, but, like, I don't think it's necessarily just like, oh, like it's such a great work, people are still talking about it 20 years later. I think it's like the very smart like business suits, that be at Gainax once upon a time, I guess Kara now, like know that like this is a franchise they can keep trotting out like every few years.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
like
I don't want to be too cynical
it
about
will
that.
remain in
I
that
mean,
cultural memory.
I think
I will be hella cynical about that.
I am honestly like I'm with Eero here. I'm pretty fucking cynical.
well, if we're talking about will they do it, sure. I'm talking about is that the reason why people still are into Evangelion? I mean, I think they're. I think that obviously the marketing and the merchandising and everything is a factor for sure. But I mean, I don't want to totally discount the actual value and influence of the show. I mean, we've seen,
Sure,
Of course.
I mean, and maybe part of it is, for better or worse, the creative influence that has been passed down to other works still even being made today, and that DNA still existing. So maybe that's part of it too. But I guess are you saying?
I mean, I think
Are you saying in 80 years from now we're going to have Surumaki's brain in a jar making Evangelion?
I mean,
With whatever
I don't know,
Kingdom Hearts
like I guess the
thing
thing
you
like
want to give it.
I guess it's the things like I mean I think anime like video games is still a relatively young enough genre that it is hard to like really tell like because like in many ways like like anime like the people who like were there at the very beginning of anime have only died less than like 20 years ago 20, 30 years ago. Like it is still a very young genre, like in the same way that video games is a very young genre, so it's hard to really tell like man, like are they gonna fucking reboot Halo in 2100 or like something? Like I don't know, they might. Like is Final Fantasy still gonna be around? It's really hard to tell, but like
well, I mean,
but to get back to your question about like Evangelion and like the meaning of like why something like blows up, I think that like you're right. Some of it are inherent qualities to Eva itself. I think that for better or worse, I think that the biggest like most iconic works they're a combination of like they are broadly they are genuinely well made. I think that they are to some degree subversive to the cultural tropes at the time, but not so subversive that they're going to turn off a mainstream audience. That I think that the mainstream audience will be receptive to that subversion because they're already beginning to head in that direction. Like there's already like like an undercurrent of like society kind of going in that direction. Like to use the Gundam example of course, like Gundam itself was in some ways a subversion of the tropes at the time, but also like the audience for mecha anime and anime in general was already beginning to trend in that direction in in many ways as a result of like there's often talks about like how like media began to trend more towards that kind of like war and like on the boots on the ground style fiction because of like anxieties about the Cold War and Vietnam and stuff like that. Like society as a whole is already beginning to like trend in that direction, even if they hadn't yet found the work that would represent that. I mean, I hate to evoke it, but like in many ways that's similar with like Game of Thrones, right? I think the reason why Game of Thrones blew up is because like it is fantasy. It was like generally well made on a technical level. It was subversive, but like subversive in a way that I think the audience was already like receptive to. And they just needed that. It just needed to be the work that was lucky enough to be the one that gets in front of people's eyes at the right time.
That's why I'm saying marketing, right? Like,
yeah, and how much of that is marketing, right? Like how much of that is just like because that's the thing. Like Game of Thrones was like a very old book, right? Like, is it just that they got lucky enough that like they happened to make the TV series like when the time was right, when like the audience was like ready for it?
No, I think that's totally a factor. It's a lot of it's like a chemical formula that if we knew what it was, we could just crank out hits, right? But
oh yeah, totally. But it is very imprecise science, I think.
But I don't know. I think the at the very least, Evangelion's place in anime history is safe. Whether
totally.
when people are recounting the history of anime, it's always going to have a place for sure. And I mean, if we're looking for, what was coming out 20 years before Evangelion, we're still talking about some of that stuff, right? Like Gundam or Yamato or whatever. They're still cranking out movies for that. Like there's so.
I mean, that's a thing, right? And once again, I think that's a thing, right? Is like how many of these works are iconic because,
they keep them going.
to echo Eero here, yeah, like they keep making them, like Yamato is a series that, frankly, I did not really exist in like my cultural mindset until 2199.
Maybe
like,
I remember because we
Legend of the Galactic Heroes, to invoke that again, did not really begin. Like I was aware of it, but did not begin to exist in my mind until DNT. Like how much of this is also just like the fucking just like grinding endless machine of like media consumption.
At least they waited 30 years on Legend of Galactic Heroes, right? But
yes, and I think in many ways, like if we're like starting to like maybe like begin to round the corner to the final stretch here of this podcast, I do want to like speak on one last thing related to like all this stuff, and it's like related to this specifically, like just churning out the stuff time and time again is like. I think the actual greatest tragedy of Evangelion is that Anno himself became consumed by Evangelion, by this franchise. Like, I think it's a tragedy that Anno has not made anything like other than like Shin Godzilla. He has not really made anything like new in anime ever since.
You have to wonder, did this end up just making him more miserable or what? I mean, like, is it now like an albatross on his neck, or is he just tweaking it for?
I mean, I think that's the thing. I think many creators
until he gets to perfect or whatever, but
right, and that's the thing. That is a sin that all creators commit. Like, believe me, as an artist, I can say that like it is the intrinsic desire of every creator in the world to continue to tweak something until this like vaunted ideal of perfection. And the reason why that most artists do not spend all their entire lives working on a single work is because of like the very real like material and financial responsibilities we have. Like I'm sure that like there are many like iconic anime out there that like if the creators who made them had the choice, they would totally spend the next 10 years just working on that one thing until it's perfect, but they can't because like it's not marketable enough, it's not famous enough, it's not putting food on the table. So like most artists have to leave that instinct behind, but every now and then you get that work that blows up so big that the creator is allowed to like indulge in that obsession. I mean, I think to make the parallel with like the video games equivalent is like Hideo Kojima and Metal Gear Solid, right? Like is like Kojima was allowed to become obsessed with Metal Gear Solid until it was literally ripped from his hands.
But even then, like you can look at getting off topic, but then you can look at every game and see the holes where he could not polish it the way he wanted it.
Yes, totally. And so I think with Anno, it's like I think the greatest tragedy of like Anno is like he cannot let go of Evangelion, like, which is a shame because here's the thing: if you look at that man's career as a whole, he did some great things.
He's a great director.
Evangelion.
Like,
yeah, he's a fantastic director. Gunbuster, and did he do Nadia? Did he direct Nadia, or was that
was Anno? Yeah.
That was Anno, like Nadia and Gunbuster, and like the stuff he worked on with Miyazaki and like Nausicaa.
How many other projects did not get made because?
Yeah, and
I joke about. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yes, the hashtag free Tsurumaki. Yes. But that's it. We joke, but I genuinely feel that way about Anno and Kara as a whole. I think it is a tragedy I think it is a genuine tragedy that a man like Tsurumaki, made was like almost like responsible for so many aspects of Fooly Cooly, such a like unique and fresh and interesting anime, and like he hasn't really been allowed to like stretch those wings ever since because like. Again, like I'm not trying to make it sound like he's a slave, but like
no,
he feel like maybe he's just chained by his sense of obligation to Anno to like see Evangelion through. But as a result, how many decades of his life were lost to this monolith of a property?
Yeah,
like same with Anno, like for better or worse. Here's the thing. I'm gonna, despite being the biggest Trigger fan in the world, I'll say outright. I don't think Imaishi has actually made anything as good as Gurren Lagann ever since. I really don't think anything he has made since Gurren Lagann has lived up to that.
Agreed.
However, I think it would be deeply tragic if here in 2019 Imaishi was still making Gurren Lagann.
Right.
I think that would be a tragedy. Like, even though they're not as good as Gurren Lagann, I am glad that Imaishi made Panty and Stalking. I'm glad he made Kill la Kill. I'm glad he made Promare. I'm glad he's still trying new things, because even if they're even if none of them ever live up to Gurren Lagann ever again, I will still love that man's work because, like, I mean, yes, I don't want to say they're all unique and new, but he is trying different. He's making different things, and I think that will always be an intrinsically more interesting creator. Even Tomino, who like is chained to Gundam, for one reason or another, he made other stuff. He made King Geiner, he made Ideon, he made fucking Brain Powered. He...
I don't know if it's helping your case, G, but I get your point.
My point is that, like, he made other stuff, and like
even his like other Gundam shows are extremely different.
Yeah, like you look at like Tournay or G-Reco or Victory or F91. Like, that is a creator who was obsessed with like even within the same franchise, the same property, he is obsessed with trying new things. Because, like, I mean, you can read this in interviews. Tomino genuinely believes he has nothing left interesting to say about the original Gundam.
Right.
Like, he has said time and time again, he is not interested in the UC anymore.
Right.
He believes that he has told the story of Gundam, and that, like, anything else that Bandai makes, I mean, he straight up said he doesn't give a shit about it, Like, it doesn't matter to him. And I think that is a much more interesting creator than, like, I think I almost wouldn't mind if, like, Anno made another Evangelion, but was, like, a different character in different universe, or, like, I don't know, a different planet or whatever. Like, but the fact that, like, in 2019, we're still like, hey, look, it's Shinji and Asuka. Well, why she got the eye patch? Is that Kaworu? Like,
yeah,
it's
I
like,
mean, that was my biggest disappointment when the first movie was announced and they showed it. I'm like, why are you bothering to just do this again? Like, we've been here. Like, and I agree, G. Like, if we were going to take something Evangelion related, but just do a completely different spin on it, or like a different character or some other aspect of it, okay, fine, maybe. But like, this was literally, especially the first movie, was like shot for shot remake of something that wasn't really that old yet. Like, it wasn't even that much time passed.
I mean, I think, and I think that's like what bothers me about Anno. Like, whether this is like of his own design or because of like just the forces around him, but I just think, like, if there's anything that I could actually, like, if there's anything I actually want to hold against Evangelion, not just like it's like myopic, ignorant fan base, like, if there's any actual one thing I want to hold against Evangelion, it is like what it did to Anno as a creator and his career.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know what could have been, right? Like, that's the hard part.
I just hold out this like naive, faint hope that, okay, maybe once Anno puts 4.0 to rest, like, once this is done,
he'll be back together.
Maybe
he's doing Shin Ultraman, right?
Right, then he's doing Shin Ultraman, and it's like, the thing that actually worries me about his announcement of doing Shin Ultraman is that the reason why 3.0 got delayed is because of, Shin Godzilla, right?
I think they seemed pretty determined on
instead of doing it after 4.0.
Yeah. Okay. And how much do you think Anno having to say that is
3.0 plus 1.0?
Right, how much of that is the anxiety around, like, the idea that, oh no, Anno is gonna do the thing again of, like, actually we're just gonna keep pushing back 4.0 and, like...
Just, like, do Animator Expo 2, like, please.
Sure, hell, do something, I don't know, like, that's a thing. I'm not saying this is easy, alright? I'm not gonna make this sound like it's a light task, but I think that I just want Anno to do something new, like, something different. Like, it's... Because I think that, like, all our talk about the legacy of Evangelion, about its enduring iconic status, I just think some of it's just because, like, Anno won't let it go. He won't let Evangelion go. He can't.
And I mean, the history's been written. Like, what is he going to do to change the history? Like I feel like the reception to the latest Evangelion movies haven't really been all that great. Like, but nobody. It doesn't seem to have much impact on people's opinion of the original stuff. Like, so, like, what is he going to do to, like, it's not even really changing the perception of Evangelion at this point, right? Like, maybe it is only for his own self gratification. Who knows? But yeah, hashtag free Tsurumaki. He could have directed Fooly Cooly 2 and 3.
Man, don't. Fucking world we live in where it's Tsurumaki. Like,
Planet Wiz.
Oh man,
we need to stop.
Hurting me. That's the frustrating thing. Like, and how many other like guys are there at Kara?
How
that
much
are,
other talent
like,
are they tying up, right?
We just don't know them, right?
Getting
like,
to, but yeah.
yeah, it's
like I said. I think at least for the original series, its place in history is locked in place, and it's always going to be, I think, a fascinating topic to look into this show and talk about it. I know I've enjoyed the ride, having not rewatched it in a long time, and getting to experience it with you guys. And G, you're first. I don't know if the audience understands how long we've been trying to get G to watch Evangelion.
Look, man, there's a lot of mecha anime out there, and I'm a very busy man. It's
been a long time. Let's say that. So I guess indirect thanks somehow to Netflix for being the catalyst for us.
Yes, for forcing my hand.
Yeah, thanks Netflix.
Thanks Netflix. Even though they did what they did with it, but yeah, I've enjoyed this process. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. I hope everybody listening enjoyed following along. And I think that's it.
Yeah, once again, I think thank you guys for thanks to you guys as well for accompanying me on this journey. I think I think it's been a really worthwhile experience.
Yeah.
Again, like, regardless of my feelings on the show, I am glad I got to experience it. It has, just like when I watched the original Mobile Suit Gundam, watching this show has helped me kind of open my eyes to, opens my eyes to some context that that I missed in the past, and I think for that reason, if nothing else, as you said, Jill, like, it's a deeply fascinating show. I'm not sure if I can bring myself to call it a good show, but it is a fascinating one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're finally done.
Ira, do you have any final words before we wrap it up then?
Congratulations.
Oh, one more time. Congratulations. Guys.
Congratulations.
We already did this at the end of the first
we
part.
Did end.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. So
I'm tired.
Yeah, we're done. I just want to do our housekeeping one last time so everybody knows. Please follow us at theglorioblog.com to see our other content, our other projects. Who knows what other podcasts we may do once this.
How convenient timing that we're heading into the leg of Legend of Galactic Heroes that was made post Ava.
Yeah. Yes.
Huh. That's interesting.
So there you go. So check that out. So check out our other podcast, the Glorio Chat, for our general anime talk. We've got Legend of the Glorio Heroes with Iro and G watching Legend of the Galactic Heroes. That's going to be interesting as we're hitting the end of season 3 on that one. And then what other podcasts do we have? Well, I guess this one's ending, but we also have the Glorio's King of the Kaiju with Chris and Collins, who have I think a third or fourth episode.
They watched Gamera and Rodan, and coming up is Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster.
So
cool.
If you want to check out some a bit of a classier show with some British dudes talking about dudes in monster suits, that is. And including great segments like which monsters would make good stuffed animals. I think that was one of the topics they had in there. Definitely check that out. And that's it, guys. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you around.
Wait, where's the fan service?